Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Alyssa Burkett. Alyssa Burkett was born on December 31, 1995, in Mosquito, Texas, to Teresa and Burkett in Joshua Forey. She has 3 older sisters, Nikki, Madison, and Taylor, and 2 older brothers, Landon and Tyler. Alyssa showed creative talent from a young age. At the age of 7, she dreamed of becoming a fashion designer and even made her own clothes. Her grandfather, Russell Forey, a musician, encouraged Alyssa's passion, and at the age of 13, Alyssa decided to change her career path and pursue a career in law. Russell supported Alyssa's decision. After graduating from Royce City High School, Alyssa enrolled in a local college. When she was 18, Alyssa met a boy named Andrew Bird. He was 9 years older than her and seemed to be a mysterious bad boy. Despite her family's objections, Alyssa began pursuing Andrew. The relationship was unstable and complicated. Andrew did not work and relied on Alyssa for support. However, Andrew was very possessive, constantly monitoring Alyssa's every move. Her friends advised her to break up with Andrew many times, but Alyssa did not listen. In January 2019, 23-year-old Alyssa discovered that she was pregnant with Andrew's child. This unexpected pregnancy took Alyssa by surprise and forced her to rethink her future plans. Alyssa suspected that Andrew would not be a good father in the future, so Alyssa decided to break up with Andrew and raise her daughter on her own. Alyssa dropped out of college because of her pregnancy. On December 31, 2019, her 24th birthday, Alyssa gave birth to a healthy baby girl and named her Willow. Despite the challenges ahead, Alyssa is still trying her best to be a good mother. Alyssa often shares family photos on social media platforms. People close to Alyssa describe her as outspoken, energetic, kind, and has a bright smile. Alyssa has worked hard to earn money to take care of her daughter. She is working at Green Tree, a residential real estate company. With the support of her family, especially her grandparents, Alyssa tried to give her daughter a peaceful childhood while staying away from Andrew because she considered him unreliable. However, Andrew refused to give up. He initiated a fierce legal battle to gain custody of Willow, asserting that Andrew would achieve his goals at all costs and nothing could stop him. In April 2020, just 4 months after Willow was born, a woman named Holly Elkins, 22, appeared in Andrew's life. Holly Elkins quickly moved in with Andrew and began planning their life together. Holly Elkins saw Alyssa as a rival and sought to eliminate her from Andrew's life. Alyssa considered herself the best mother for Willow. She began to feel the growing threat from Andrew and his fiancée Holly Elkins. Friends advised Alyssa to be cautious and prepare for the worst. Little did Alyssa know that her life was about to be seriously threatened. As soon as Andrew Bird and Holly Elkins began dating, they immediately launched a plan to bring Alyssa down. Their goal was to ruin Alyssa's reputation and take away Alyssa's custody of their child in order to gain custody of Willow. In text messages, Holly Elkins openly expressed her desire to eliminate Alyssa. Holly Elkins wrote to Andrew that Alyssa was controlling him, making him prioritize Alyssa, and demanding that Andrew show subservience to Alyssa. Holly Elkins viciously criticized Alyssa, calling her a liar, stupid, and a bad mother. Holly Elkins encouraged Andrew to take action against Alyssa, claiming that Alyssa was hindering their family happiness with Willow. Holly Elkins and Andrew installed a GPS tracking device on Alyssa's car to monitor her every move. Holly Elkins then anonymously called 911, falsely reporting that Alyssa was driving erratically in order to discredit her with the police. On another occasion, Holly Elkins went to the police station and falsely accused Alyssa of attacking her. To prove this story, Holly Elkins scratched her chest. The couple also hired a private investigator to find evidence against Alyssa and her new boyfriend. However, The detective did not find any evidence that could incriminate Alyssa, but Holly Elkins and Andrew did not give up. In September 2020, Holly Elkins and Andrew hid drugs and unregistered weapons in Alyssa's car and anonymously reported that Alyssa was trafficking drugs from her car. During the interrogation, Alyssa cried and insisted that she had nothing to do with drugs and immediately suspected Andrew of having a role in the plot, with the aim of discrediting Alyssa in the eyes of the police. Unfortunately, she could not prove it. Holly Elkins and Andrew planned every detail of the crime. On September 10, 2020, Holly Elkins went to a sports store with Andrew. There, Andrew bought a black raincoat with cash, and Holly Elkins helped Andrew choose the right outfit for the crime plan. On September 14, Holly Elkins went to a pharmacy and bought dark foundation and other cosmetics to disguise Andrew. On September 19, Holly Elkins and Andrew stopped by a hardware store where they bought shotgun shells and a large Camillus knife. Both the gun and knife would be used by Andrew to take revenge on his daughter's mother, Alyssa. During the last week of September, Holly Elkins texted Andrew frequently, urging him to carry out the plan. Holly Elkins stressed that they needed to resolve the issue. Holly Elkins knew that their relationship would be in danger if Andrew did not act. Upon receiving the text messages, Andrew put his plan into action. The search history on Andrew's phone showed that he had begun researching how to remove gunpowder residue from his hands after shooting, indicating that Andrew did not want to leave any traces. 6 days before the attack, Alyssa and Andrew purchased a used black Ford Expedition. Andrew told the seller that he would use the car to supervise a school project. On the morning of October 2nd, Andrew disguised himself as another man. Andrew wore a black raincoat and parked his Ford Expedition SUV near Alyssa's home. Through text messages provided by Holly Elkins, Andrew learned Alyssa's daily routine and determined where Andrew could find Alyssa. On the morning of October 2nd, 2020, Alyssa dropped off her 1-year-old daughter, Willow, at her grandmother's house while she was on her way to work at Green Tree Home Management in Carrollton, as she did every day. Alyssa parked her car in front of the office around 9 a.m. and was about to enter the house when a black SUV sped toward her car. Andrew, dressed in a black hoodie, wearing a mask and holding a handgun, attacked Alyssa. She had no chance to react before he approached her and shot her in the head through the window. Alyssa dropped to the steering wheel, her face and hair covered in blood. Despite her serious injuries, Alyssa still had enough strength to open the car door and tried to crawl toward the office door. Alyssa was trying to call for help, but her body was weak and covered in blood. Despite the critical situation, Alyssa showed incredible willpower in her final moments. Andrew quickly returned when he saw movement. He pulled a large hunting knife from his coat and attacked Alyssa, who was on the ground. Andrew grabbed Alyssa's hair and brutally stabbed her multiple times in the neck, chest, and abdomen, totaling at least 13 wounds. Alyssa died on the spot from these severe injuries. When Alyssa's coworkers ran out to the parking lot after hearing her screams, they found Alyssa lying in a pool of blood with her throat slit. They attempted to revive Alyssa using CPR but were unsuccessful. By this time, Andrew had escaped in his black SUV, leaving the bloody weapon at the scene. Witnesses described the attacker as a tall, muscular man dressed all in black with a mask or hood. Many people mistook him for an African American at the time of the attack. According to Holly Elkins, she was at home with Andrew's daughter, Willow, giving her an alibi. Holly Elkins later told police that Andrew was believed to be with her the entire time. The brutal murder, which happened so brazenly in a public place, shocked the people of Carrollton. They were puzzled about the motive for this dangerous crime. However, Alyssa's loved ones and friends immediately suspected Andrew Bird. They knew about the ongoing dispute between Alyssa and Andrew over the custody of their child. Alyssa's mother, holding back tears, reported her suspicions about Andrew to the police. She shared with the police about Andrew's threats and harassment of Alyssa, as well as the long legal battle for custody of her granddaughter. According to her, Andrew had repeatedly stated that Alyssa would not be allowed to raise their daughter Willow. The investigation into Alyssa Burkett's murder was launched. At first, Alyssa's colleagues provided details about the attacker's appearance. This man, despite wearing a mask, was tall, muscular, appeared to be muscular, and some even thought he was African American. The testimony of Alyssa's loved ones made her ex-boyfriend, Andrew Bird, the main subject of the investigation. Alyssa's new boyfriend also said that Andrew had given them detailed addresses, even though no one had told Andrew. Based on this information, police began tracking Andrew's location in Raleigh. Not long after, they saw Andrew, along with his daughter Willow, packing up to leave for an extended period of time. When Andrew got into the car, the police stopped and searched the unmarked car. During the search, they found men's boots cut into pieces and soaked in drugs. Police discovered items related to camouflage makeup, napkins with makeup on them. When police searched Andrew's home, they found a lot of evidence. They discovered the pin for a GPS tracking device that Andrew had attached to Alyssa and her new boyfriend's car. Police also found an automatic silencer for a handgun and a cache of weapons. And police also found the phone that Andrew used when he called the police to report the discovery of drugs in Alyssa's car. Police confiscated 3 of Andrew's phones. When police checked the search history of one of those cell phones, they found questions about how to disassemble a gun barrel on his hand. This suggests that Andrew was trying to cover his tracks. Police found an abandoned black Ford Expedition SUV on the outskirts of town. When they examined the cabin, forensic experts found Alyssa's blood and fake beard hairs with Andrew's DNA. The dealer confirmed that Andrew had bought the car and paid in cash. Forensic tests showed that Alyssa's fatal bullet was fired from a .45 caliber handgun found in the car. Andrew's fingerprints were also found on the handle of the hunting knife. Additionally, Andrew's handwriting appeared on GPS devices and in calls to police. It appears that the prosecution has assembled evidence of Andrew Bird's guilt. However, the complaint also seeks to hold his co-defendant, Holly Elkins, accountable. Email exchanges between Andrew and Holly Elkins revealed Holly Elkins' role in planning and inciting the crime. The investigation spanned several months, during which time the prosecution assembled strong evidence tying Andrew and Holly Elkins to the brutal death of Alyssa Burkett. In June 2022, the Alyssa Burkett murder trial began, nearly 2 years after the tragedy. The 2 defendants, 35-year-old Andrew Bird and 23-year-old Holly Elkins, were charged with stalking, conspiracy, and first-degree murder. A key witness was Christopher Mayo, Alyssa's new boyfriend at the time of her death. Christopher Mayo told the jury what had happened over the course of several months, including the arguments and troubles they had endured. Christopher Mayo recalled numerous occasions when Alyssa expressed to him her fear that Andrew would harm her. Christopher Mayo witnessed Andrew's frequent threats over the phone, along with lies that damaged Alyssa's reputation with social services and the police. In addition, Christopher Mayo believed that the person directly directing all of the above actions was Holly Elkins. Alyssa's co-workers and friends shared her grief. Before her death, Alyssa shared with her co-workers and friends her fear of Andrew and the feeling of being constantly watched. Alyssa even told a friend that if anything happened to her, Andrew would be the one to do it. Forensic experts presented the jury with a large amount of physical evidence linking Andrew Bird to the crime scene. The evidence included Andrew's DNA and fingerprints on the murder weapon, as well as gunpowder residue and camouflage in his home and car. And evidence of email exchanges between Andrew and Holly Elkins, indicating they had planned the crime together. Andrew's defense argued that his actions were unintentional and not premeditated. The defense also stressed that Andrew was under a lot of pressure and stress from the protracted legal battle, which had affected Andrew's emotions. However, evidence from the correspondence and the careful planning of the act refutes these theories. Meanwhile, Holly Elkins denied any involvement, offering a plea, but her testimony was also full of lies. Holly Elkins' text messages incited Andrew to take action against her rival Alyssa. In May 2023, the judge handed down the verdict. Andrew Bird was sentenced to 43 years in prison. Holly Elkins was sentenced to 20 years in prison for being an accessory to a crime. The courtroom erupted in applause as justice was finally served. Alyssa Burkett's killers got what they deserved. Alyssa family, in pain and tears, expressed deep gratitude to the journalists and the jury. Although the killer faces a harsh sentence, Alyssa Burkett's family cannot make up for their terrible loss. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Londano. When 31-year-old Jennifer Londano failed to arrive at work in Englewood, New Jersey, her family and friends grew worried. As a known hard worker, Jennifer managed the new Luna Lounge on Armory Street. She was last spotted in the early morning hours of June 25, 2017. As she closed the bar, scheduled to return to work that evening to open the lounge, she never showed up. Colleagues waiting for her at the bar started calling her, but her phone was off, which only added to their concern because Jennifer had always been reachable and had never been late for work. Jennifer lived by herself, and her family grew concerned when she failed to return home, prompting them to file a missing persons report at the police station. Her loved ones emphasized that Jennifer always kept them updated on her whereabouts, but her unusual silence this time around sparked fears that something might have befallen her. When the police started their investigation, they went to Jennifer's apartment first. They found the front door locked with no signs of forced entry or damage. After gaining access, they didn't notice anything suspicious at first. The apartment didn't appear to be a crime scene, as everything was clean and organized. Nothing valuable seemed to have been disturbed or stolen. After finding no leads at Jennifer's apartment, the police proceeded to the establishment, the bar where she worked as a manager, to investigate. Upon interviewing the staff, they discovered that Jennifer had no conflicts with either the patrons or her co-workers. Everyone praised her highly, describing her as a kind, helpful, and hard-working person. Known for her sweet disposition, Jennifer was ambitious and wanted to make a name for herself, which led her to partner with 40-year-old Rafael Lolos in 2016 to open the Luna Lounge in Englewood, New Jersey. Although Lolos provided the financial backing, Jennifer served as the manager. Jennifer's natural ability to connect with customers greatly contributed to the bar's success. The staff appreciated her warm personality, and her happiness was contagious. The police investigation revealed that Jennifer and Rafael were not only business partners, but also romantically involved and made no attempt to conceal their relationship. Despite their closeness, they had not yet decided to live together. On the morning Jennifer went missing, she closed the bar and got into Rafael's car, which was waiting for her after her shift. As he was the last person to see her, the detectives decided to question him. Rafael stated that he drove Jennifer home after closing the bar. He openly discussed their relationship with the officers, admitting that they had argued in the past, but claimed that everything was fine on that particular day. They went to her apartment together after he dropped her off from work, but he left later as Jennifer needed to rest before reopening the bar that evening. After Jennifer disappeared, he maintained contact with her family, and together they attempted to uncover her possible whereabouts. Although there was no reason to suspect the man's involvement in her disappearance, the police shifted their focus to pursuing other leads. As Jennifer's phone was turned off on the day she vanished, its location could not be traced. The last signal received from it was from a cell tower near her residence. The police also questioned neighbors, but none of them reported seeing or hearing anything unusual. The police reached out to the bank where Jennifer was a frequent customer. The bank's records of money movements can reveal the owner's whereabouts and fate. In this case, the police were in for a surprise when the bank shared the requested data. It emerged that Jennifer's bank card had been used even after her disappearance. The discovery sparked suspicions that she might be in hiding, but her family insisted she would never leave them without a trace. The police then launched a deeper investigation to uncover more details about the card's usage, including the time, location, and circumstances. 2 days after Jennifer's disappearance, a passerby spotted an unusual object in the water at Brooklyn's Pier 44 on June 27th. The man stared at it for a long time, struggling to identify it, until he realized with horror that it was a human body part, specifically from the waist down to the knees. The police were called, and the pier was quickly cordoned off. The discovery of a body part in the water was made under circumstances that are too disturbing to describe. It is unclear whether the part had been intentionally thrown into the water at that spot or had been carried there by the currents. Despite an entire day of searching, divers failed to find any other remains or evidence. The police faced a challenging task in identifying the victim. The discovery was sent for forensic examination, and upon closer inspection, a tattoo was found on the victim's right thigh. This could be a crucial clue. The police released an image of the tattoo, hoping that someone who recognized it would come forward with information. The tattoo inscription was in Sanskrit, an ancient Indian language known for its complex grammar. When police asked an expert to decipher it, they discovered that neither the tattoo owner nor the artist was familiar with Sanskrit. It appeared they had intended to write the name Liliana, but did so incorrectly due to their lack of understanding of the language. Just 4 days after the shocking discovery, the police received another distressing call. A passerby had spotted a foot on the riverbank near 79th Street. The area was sealed off by responding police officers, who then retrieved part of the leg from the knee down from the water. Even at this stage, investigators suspected that the 2 sets of remains were likely from the same body. The fingernails on the leg were painted pink. Divers searched the area of the river but were unsuccessful, failing to find any other body parts or evidence to aid the investigation that began after the initial discovery. Forensic examination soon confirmed that the fragments found were indeed parts of the same body. By this time, the victim's identity had already been discovered. A few days after the police released an image of the tattoo, a woman came forward, recognizing the tattoo as belonging to someone she knew. Jennifer's mother, Gladys Quintero, saw the picture on the news and immediately identified it as her daughter's. The tattoo was a tribute to Jennifer's late aunt, meaning Lily or Lillian. Gladys accompanied Jennifer's family to New York to identify the remains. They were devastated when it was confirmed that the body parts belonged to Jennifer. The investigation had now become a homicide case. Jennifer's family was shocked by her death, particularly the brutal manner in which she was killed. Although the exact cause of her death was impossible to determine, the police invested significant effort into finding other parts of her body, unfortunately without success. Meanwhile, as family and friends mourned Jennifer and paid their respects by leaving flowers at the bar where she worked, detectives worked to uncover who had used her credit card. They visited stores where the card was used and reviewed security footage, which ultimately led them to identify Raphael, Jennifer's partner, as the suspect. The investigation revealed that Raphael had left Jennifer's apartment on the day she went missing to go shopping. He bought a box of garbage bags and 2 meat cleavers using Jennifer's credit cards. Later that night, he drove across the George Washington Bridge into Manhattan with his cell phone records, placing him in an area along the Hudson River. Raphael never returned to Jennifer's apartment. 2 days later, the torso was discovered. The evidence pointed to a horrific possibility. Had Raphael killed Jennifer and used the meat cleavers to dismember her body? The thought was unbearable, but the evidence was damning. The police secured an arrest warrant and a search warrant for his residence, anticipating his capture. Fearing the detectives would soon track him down, Raphael rented a hotel room, paying in cash, and took up temporary residence there. However, this attempt to avoid detection proved futile, as his location was swiftly discovered, leading to his arrest. Raphael offered no resistance during the arrest and subsequently denied any involvement in Jennifer's death, claiming that she had voluntarily handed over the credit card to him. He further maintained that she was unharmed when he parted ways with her, but detectives gradually uncovered mounting evidence that contradicted his testimony, revealing it to be a blatant falsehood. A search of Raphael's home uncovered dark red stains in the bathroom, which were later confirmed by lab analysis to be Jennifer's dried blood. Detectives examining the couple's communication on a messaging platform found a pattern of frequent quarrels, mostly driven by jealousy. During the house search, a box from the post office and a bag containing a tracking device were discovered in one of the rooms, revealing that Raphael had secretly installed a GPS tracking device on Jennifer's car, enabling him to monitor her movements when they were apart. Analysis of cell tower data showed that after Raphael picked Jennifer up from work, they drove together to her apartment. Jennifer's phone was soon switched off, but Raphael's phone remained active, transmitting a signal to a cell tower in the Hudson River area between 9 p.m. and midnight that same day. This suggested that Jennifer may have already been killed, and the killer drove to the river to dispose of the body. Raphael and Londono had opened a bar together less than a year before she vanished, but their relationship was marked by frequent fights over money, which blurred the lines between their friendships, partnership, and romance. In their exchanged messages, Raphael labeled Jennifer a gold digger, and his tone vacillated between threats, apologies, and declarations of love. Jennifer's family was shocked that the man who had professed his love and participated in her search could become so consumed by jealousy that he would commit such a heinous crime. Raphael refused to explain himself, pleaded not guilty, and retained a lawyer. Although the police couldn't find the exact knives Raphael bought on the day Jennifer disappeared, they purchased the same type from the same store. Forensic analysis revealed that Jennifer's body had been mutilated with those knives. Raphael was charged with murder, desecration of human remains, stalking, hindering apprehension, and credit card fraud. The trial began in November 2019 and lasted 2 months. Prosecutors argued that Jennifer was killed in her apartment by Raphael following a jealous argument. According to the prosecutor, Raphael was obsessed with Jennifer and was devastated when he suspected she was cheating on him. Raphael's lawyers emphasized to the court that the state lacked evidence about Jennifer's actual cause of death. They pointed out that there were no signs of a struggle at her apartment and no marks in the bathtub where the dismemberment supposedly took place. The defense team argued that this proved Raphael's innocence, while the prosecution countered that it indicated evidence had been deliberately hidden. The prosecutor claimed that sometimes the absence of evidence is in itself evidence, specifically evidence that the perpetrator tried to erase traces of the crime. The prosecutor noted that Jennifer's bathtub was unusually clean, with no DNA evidence found, not even a single hair or skin particle. According to the prosecutor, an ordinary person's bathtub would not be that clean, implying that the crime scene had been thoroughly sanitized. During the trial, Jennifer's mother tearfully addressed the judge, saying, "You need to understand, this man has destroyed my life. Jennifer was my beloved daughter, the one I loved more than anyone else in the world. He has ruined me and my entire family." After reviewing the case file, the judge concluded that Raphael had an unhealthy obsession with Jennifer. When given the opportunity to speak or make a statement, Raphael refused to comment, instead only speaking with his lawyer. In December 2019, following 3 days of deliberation, the jury found Raphael guilty on all counts. The verdict was announced in February 2020. Raphael, 43, was subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment. He will have to serve 63 years, before being eligible for parole, which is the maximum sentence possible, meaning he will be 106 years old before parole becomes an option. Tragically, the rest of Jennifer's body was never found or recovered. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of April Tinsley. April Tinsley was born on March 18, 1980, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, as the eldest child in her family. She attended elementary school and was involved in the local church's children's choir, but her true passion was socializing with friends, exploring the neighborhood, and simply enjoying herself. On Friday, April 1, 1988, 8-year-old April returned home from school early, eager to start her afternoon adventures. After lunch, she asked her mom if she could visit her friend Nicole, who lived just a few hundred yards away. Her mom consented, as she had many times before. Nicole's house was a short, familiar walk away, and their neighborhood was considered a safe haven. As April set off, her mom reminded her to call as soon as she arrived at the Coles house and handed her an umbrella, anticipating the impending rain. A few minutes later, April called her mom from the Coles house, and her mom instructed her to be back home by 4 p.m. However, when the appointed time came and went, April still hadn't returned. Her mom began to worry that she might get caught in the rain and called Nicole's house. Nicole's mom answered, saying that April and her daughter had gone to play at a nearby playground. While they were there, it started to rain, and April realized she had left her umbrella at Nicole's house. April told Nicole she would walk to her house, retrieve the umbrella, and then head home, as she had promised her mom. Nicole, on the other hand, decided to visit another friend's house, and the girls went their separate ways. However, when Nicole's mom informed April's mom that April never stopped by to get the umbrella, despite leaving the playground almost an hour ago, April's mom immediately grew concerned. She alerted her husband that their daughter was missing, and they set out to search for her. Several neighbors joined in upon hearing about April's disappearance, and together they combed all the streets connecting Nicole's house, the playground, and their home. But they found no sign of her. The parents then decided to contact the police. Officers arrived at the Tinsley's home, obtaining a photo and description of April, and promptly launched a search effort. Within hours, dozens of neighbors joined the search party, eager to help the family locate their daughter. The search area spanned several miles around April's usual route, but despite their efforts, no signs of her were found. As night descended, the police began to suspect that they were likely dealing with a kidnapping, reasoning that if April had simply gotten lost, she would have been located by now. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. The next day, the search area was broadened, and news of April's disappearance swept through the city. Despite an influx of police and volunteers joining the effort, they still couldn't find her or any leads. This continued for 3 days until April 4th, when a jogger phoned 911, reporting a disturbing discovery. While running along a road about 20 meters from April's home, he had noticed something peculiar in a ditch. As he drew closer, he realized it was a human body. The police rushed to the scene and confirmed the worst. It was April Tinsley. She was fully clothed, except for one shoe. Officers couldn't find any obvious signs of trauma on her body, but they were almost certain she had been murdered. They theorized that an unknown perpetrator had killed her elsewhere, then brought her to this field and left her body in a ditch. Police also discovered an adult toy nearby, although they weren't sure if it was linked to the case. Later, they found April's second shoe lying on the other side of the road, a few hundred yards from her body. Medical experts determined that April's death was caused by asphyxiation, and she had also been sexually assaulted. They established that her death had occurred within the 48 hours preceding the discovery of her body, indicating that the perpetrator had held her captive for some time. Although forensic science and DNA analysis were still in their infancy, experts managed to collect evidence from the body. However, the lack of a DNA database at the time meant detectives had to rely on new leads. Fortunately, they didn't have to wait long after the body was found. Investigators appealed to the public through the media, and numerous tips were received. 2 tips, in particular, caught their attention. One individual contacted the police, reporting that he had driven past the field where April's body was found and noticed an old blue pickup truck parked on the side of the road. Investigators believed it could belong to the killer, and the witness might have seen it when the perpetrator dumped April's body in the ditch, making this lead even more valuable. A woman living along the route from the playground to Nicole's house reported seeing a girl resembling April on the day of her disappearance. According to the witness, as the girl walked along the road, an old blue pickup truck pulled up beside her, and, a few seconds later, it drove away with the girl on board. Although the car obstructed her view, the witness couldn't see exactly how the girl got inside. This tip became the first significant lead for investigators, who were also provided with a description of the driver: a white man around 30 years old with blonde or ginger hair. Based on this information, police created a sketch of the suspect and distributed it to the media, along with a description of his vehicle, hoping someone would recognize him. The FBI soon joined the investigation, and together with the police, they looked into the possible involvement of all men who had previously been convicted of sexual crimes living in April's area, seeking new leads. At some point, they were informed that the suspect's portrait resembled a man who had been involved in organized crime activities and had an interest in Satanism. Investigators checked on this individual, but couldn't establish his involvement. However, they arrested him for another offense unrelated to April's disappearance. Police continued to pursue leads and investigate numerous individuals, but they failed to make any significant breakthroughs. This stagnant state persisted for several months, and eventually, detectives hit a dead end. Notably, during the course of the investigation, police uncovered several other crimes against children and apprehended the perpetrators, but the individual responsible for April's murder remained at large. In the following years, the case saw no major advancements, but in May 1990, a sudden and unexpected twist emerged. A teenage boy living 10 miles from where April's body was discovered found a message on his shed written from the perspective of the perpetrator. The killer confessed to April's murder, hinting at further crimes to come, and inquired about the status of the victim's second shoe. This prompted detectives to suspect that the author was likely April's killer rather than a prankster. The discovery was significant because the detail about the victim's shoe being found several hundred yards from her body had never been released to the media, making it unlikely that anyone but the killer would know this. Another fascinating aspect of the message was that it had initially been written in pencil and then traced over in marker. This led investigators to theorize that the perpetrator may have left the message months prior to its discovery and then returned to make it more conspicuous by outlining it in marker. Police decided to release photos of the cryptic message, hoping someone would recognize the handwriting, but unfortunately, it didn't yield any breakthroughs. Just a few months later, the residents of Wayne were left reeling by the shocking news that police had discovered the body of a 7-year-old girl in another part of the city. She had been sexually assaulted, and the cause of death was asphyxiation. Given the eerie parallels to April's case, police instinctively suspected that the same perpetrator was behind this heinous crime. However, FBI profilers disagreed, convinced that they were dealing with 2 separate offenders. Despite their efforts, no progress was made in either case until 1995, when police finally linked the second victim's murder to a family friend who had since passed away. As a result, the case was closed, and investigators ceased to consider it related to April's murder. Detectives waited for the perpetrator to make contact again, as his initial message suggested he reveled in mocking the police and flaunting his apparent impunity. However, as the years went by, no new messages surfaced. The case remained stagnant until 2004, when it took a dramatic turn. A Fort Wayne girl discovered a plastic zip bag in her bike basket containing a chilling note that left her shaken. She promptly showed it to her parents, who alerted the authorities. The note read, "Hello dear, I've been watching you. I'm the one who kidnapped, assaulted, and killed April Tensley. I have a gift for you. You'll be my next victim if you don't report this to the police, and I don't see this note in tomorrow's local news. I'll destroy your home, killing everyone but you. You'll be mine." The police had no doubt that the note's author was indeed April's killer. Inside the bag with the note was a used condom sent to the laboratory for analysis. By 2004, DNA profiling had become a routine tool, and experts had already extracted a profile from the semen found on April's body. Now the analysis revealed that the biological sample from the condom matched the same individual, but he was not in the FBI database. The police reopened April's case and soon received a report of a second note. Another girl had found a plastic bag containing a similar message, including a used condom with the same man's DNA. The perpetrator had written that he had killed April Tinsley and threatened to kill this girl as well. In the following months, the police received 2 more calls about similar notes found by other girls. This time, the perpetrator had attached Polaroid photos of his genitalia, which investigators examined for clues. Although all they noticed was a green pattern on the bedsheet in the background, they tried to locate stores selling similar bedding, but it didn't lead to a breakthrough. Within just a few months, the perpetrator had left a total of 4 notes, but then fell silent for years. Once again, in 2009, the FBI released a detailed profile of the killer, including witness-identified physical characteristics, but unfortunately, it yielded no leads. For Fort Wayne investigators, this case remained a top priority for several compelling reasons. Firstly, and most importantly, they were driven to achieve justice and bring the perpetrator who took April's life to account. The killer's audacity was further demonstrated by his taunting messages to the police, which suggested he believed he would never be caught, and his threats against other girls. In a brazen move, he left behind his DNA for detectives to find, providing them with numerous biological samples. However, despite the wealth of evidence, April's killer remained absent from the FBI's database over the years, indicating he had avoided serious criminal convictions and continued to live freely. In 2012, a popular television program about unsolved crimes featured April's case, generating a fresh wave of tips, but each one ultimately led to a dead end. In 2015, detectives reopened the investigation and turned to Parabon, a company that provided law enforcement agencies with a novel service, creating portraits of individuals based on their DNA samples. This innovative approach had already successfully solved several cases. Investigators shared the portrait of the suspect in April's case online and with the media, hoping someone would recognize the person. However, luck was not on their side, and they didn't receive any valuable leads, but the police remained determined. Years later, in 2018, they contacted Parabon again, this time to explore genetic genealogy, a pioneering approach. This method involves experts taking a DNA sample and scouring publicly available genetic databases for any relatives of the DNA owner, no matter how distant. They typically find thousands of people, then study their family trees to identify someone who matches the perpetrator's criteria, such as gender, age, location at the time of the crime, and more. The unique aspect of this method is that the DNA owner doesn't need to be in a database. They can be identified solely through a long chain of relatives. Detectives working on April's case sent the killer's DNA sample to Parabon once again, waiting patiently for the results. The process of tracing relatives and studying their family trees was a lengthy one, requiring experts to sift through vast amounts of data over several months. Eventually, they informed the detectives that they had traced the DNA lineage to 2 brothers living in Fort Wayne. Now, the police had to determine which of the brothers was the killer. They placed both men under surveillance, collecting their trash in the hopes of extracting DNA samples. It wasn't long before the experts called the detectives with the long-awaited news. 30 years after the murder, they had found a perfect match. The DNA taken from the victim's body and the condoms matched the DNA of one of the brothers, 59-year-old John Miller, who lived in the small town of Grail, not far from where April's body was found. At the time of the murder, he was 29 years old and resided in the same trailer. The police decided to obtain a direct DNA sample from Miller and interrogate him. When they arrived at his trailer and asked him to accompany them to the station, he astutely guessed they were there about April Tinsley. On the way to the station, Miller engaged in small talk, appearing remarkably relaxed. At the interrogation, Miller neither denied nor contested the allegations and confessed to abducting, sexually assaulting, and murdering April. He claimed to have deliberately targeted Fort Wayne, spotting April on a deserted street and telling her to get into his car, to which she silently acquiesced. He then took her to his trailer, where he assaulted and killed her before dumping her body. Miller's lawyer advised him to plead not guilty to protract the legal process. However, he was offered a deal. In exchange for admitting guilt, the death penalty would be commuted to an 80-year prison sentence. Miller accepted the deal, admitted his guilt, and received the 80-year sentence. April's mother was disappointed that Miller escaped the death penalty, but given his advanced age, it is unlikely he will ever be released. April's father, on the other hand, thanked the investigators for their tireless efforts in finding his daughter's killer. The detectives believe Miller had a motive for wanting to be caught. He deliberately courted attention, taking risks such as leaving DNA samples at the crime scene. They suspect he was either prepared to be found out or actively sought it. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Paula Salazar. Paula Salazar was born on September 6, 2015, in Venezuela to Andrina Bermudos Milian from Matarina, Monagas, and Leonardo Salazar from Tucupito, Delta Amacuro. In 2016, Paula's parents decided to move to Ecuador with their one-year-old daughter, seeking a better life. They settled in Quito, the capital city, but their relationship began to deteriorate due to various reasons. After a month, Andrina broke up with Leonardo and moved to Cuenca, Ecuador's third-largest city, with Paula. They stayed with her best friend's mother while looking for a new place to live and work. Meanwhile, Leonardo returned to his hometown of Tucupito, Venezuela, following the breakup. Later, he immigrated again, this time to Trinidad and Tobago. Leonardo had been living with a disability for a long time, the result of a motorcycle accident in his youth that left his left arm completely paralyzed. This made it difficult for him to find a good job, even in Ecuador's capital city. After Andrina moved to Cuenca, she rarely contacted Leonardo, except to tell him that she had found a job on a farm in Tapacundo. A few months later, she started a new romantic relationship with Washington Andreas Aymaro, the wealthy owner of the farm where she worked. Andrina and Andreas had a child together in 2019. With their new baby, the family seemed happier and more united than ever. However, their lives took a dramatic turn on March 27, 2020. On that day, Andreas took Paula to the flower plantations by car, but during the trip, Paula suddenly became very sick, feeling dizzy and vomiting. Andreas was forced to stop at a public restroom to tend to her. Andreas and the 4-year-old girl Paula entered a room where Paula vomited again. Andreas left her alone for a few minutes to get a change of clothes from the car, as her clothes were dirty. When he returned, he found Paula lying with her head in the toilet bowl. He pulled her out, tried to give her first aid, and rushed her to the hospital. Despite his efforts, Paula showed no signs of life when doctors examined her. The doctors pronounced Paula dead and immediately noticed inconsistencies in Andreas' story. They saw that Paula had bruises on her body and face that couldn't have occurred as Andreas described. Following medical protocol, the doctors contacted the police, who arrived shortly and arrested Andreas as a suspect in Paula's murder. Andreas claimed Paula had drowned in the toilet bowl, but the autopsy revealed a darker truth. The tests showed that Paula had been dead for about 24 hours before arriving at the hospital, contradicting Andreas's version of events. Paula's foster father alleged that he provided her with first aid and CPR, and that these efforts took place just 20 minutes before he brought her to the hospital. However, the autopsy revealed that Paula had suffered multiple broken ribs, various microtraumas, a cracked spine, and sepsis, which ultimately led to her death. The autopsy findings were alarming, as Paula's small body showed evidence of numerous injuries, both recent and old. The evidence suggested that her death was not accidental. Paula's biological father, Leonardo Salazar, discovered the tragic news 33 days after her death, when his mother in Venezuela called to inform him of the loss, having learned of it herself from a friend of Andreina's. After Leonardo left Ecuador, Andreina began a new relationship and cut off all communication with him. This is why he didn't hear about his daughter Paula's tragedy for 3 days. The only way he found out about her was through pictures sent by Andreina and their mutual friends. Andreina even blocked him on social media, preventing him from contacting Paula, and cut off ties with most of Leonardo's relatives. Andreina turned their mutual friends against Leonardo by telling them that he didn't want to communicate with Paula. However, it was Andreina's family who eventually informed Leonardo of Paula's death, claiming that she died from COVID-19 complications. But Leonardo was skeptical, as there were very few coronavirus deaths in Ecuador at the time. He started researching the statistics and noticed that there were no child victims of the coronavirus in Ecuador. Leonardo's relatives helped him investigate, and they soon found a newspaper article about Andreina's arrest on suspicion of killing Paula. When Leonardo confronted Andreina about this, she coldly told him that Paula died from diseases and couldn't provide more information due to her lawyer's advice. Leonardo then created a Facebook page and an Instagram profile dedicated to Paula, seeking justice for her death. The posts caused a huge backlash on social media, and people in Andreina's circle began contacting Leonardo, sharing information about Paula's sad life. They sent him recordings, photos, and audio recordings that revealed the abuse Paula suffered at the hands of her stepfather and Andreina. According to witnesses, Paula was constantly depressed, shy, and frightened in the presence of her stepfather. She even confessed to being beaten by Andreina and her stepfather as punishment. Paula called her stepfather a monster and was terrified of him. She suffered from insomnia and nightmares, and her mother forced her to cook and take care of herself from a very young age. Andreina's mistreatment of Paula eventually led to her death, and Leonardo was determined to bring her to justice. At the preschool Paula attended, she constantly complained of leg and back pain, and often said she couldn't walk. The teachers also noticed bruises on her body. They took her to the health center for an examination, and the doctors concluded that Paula was being mistreated by her family. The teachers then reported the abuse to a special police organization, which launched an investigation. As a result, Paula was temporarily placed in the care of her uncle, Andreina's brother, on October 16, 2019, while the investigation continued. A hearing was scheduled for December 4, 2019, but the teachers who were supposed to testify failed to show up. The hearing was rescheduled for February 27, 2020, but again, the teachers didn't appear. Without their testimony, the court had to drop the charges against Paula's parents, and she was returned to her mother on March 27. Tragically, Paula died soon after. It is suspected that Andreina may have bribed the teachers or convinced them that Paula's parents were not responsible for her abuse. After Paula's death, Andreina was placed in protective custody, but she appealed this decision. At a hearing on June 12, 2020, the judge set a restraining order and released Andreina to house arrest. Meanwhile, Paula's father, Leonardo, was campaigning on social media and raising funds to travel from Trinidad and Tobago to Ecuador to file a complaint against Andreina. With the help of two Ecuadorian lawyers, Oswaldo and Alejandro, Leonardo was able to travel to Ecuador and file a complaint against Andreina. Leonardo's journey was extremely difficult due to closed borders and restricted travel. He had to take a raft, cross treacherous terrain, and use private transfers to reach Ecuador. On June 30th, he arrived in Quito and met with a lawyer to file his complaint. On July 6, 2020, Andreina was charged with Paula's murder, and the court ruled that she could remain under house arrest, reporting to justice twice a week. Both Andreina and her partner, Andreas, were charged with murder, which carries a maximum sentence of 13 years in prison. In November 2020, a hearing was held to set a trial date. During the hearing, Leonardo's lawyer expressed concern that Andreina might escape, given her previous suicide attempt. They requested that Andreina be fitted with an electronic monitoring bracelet, which the judge granted. A hearing was held on November 16th to reassess previous decisions. Although this process slowed down the trial, the judge managed to set a date for December. Despite limited media coverage, information about the trial of Andreas and Andreina spread through social media. The trial began on January 14, 2021, but a decision on Andreina's alternative imprisonment options had not been made, and Andreas was still being held at the Regional Detention Center. The trial was held in private, without media representatives present. Some participants joined via video link. The doctor who performed the autopsy on Paula revealed disturbing details. Paula had undergone extensive spinal reconstruction, had broken ribs that had healed on their own, and had signs of previous injuries. The autopsy also showed that Paula had nail stigmata, a condition where nails grow into the skin, as well as facial and bodily bruises and scratches, fluid buildup in her lungs, head scars, and intestinal lacerations. The assessment found that Paula's later injuries led to an infection, which gradually worsened into sepsis and ultimately caused her death. The autopsy report revealed that Paula had been dead for around 24 hours by the time Andreas took her to the hospital. The extent of her internal and external injuries shockingly demonstrated the extreme cruelty she suffered and the gross neglect by her guardians, who had never sought medical attention for her. Additionally, Paula was severely malnourished, underweight, and small for her age, with deficiencies in essential minerals and nutrients. In an attempt to downplay her role in Paula's abuse, her mother, Andreina, claimed that Paula had psychological problems, implying that the child's injuries were self-inflicted as a way to seek attention. The girl's mother testified that after her brother's birth, Paula felt neglected, stopped sleeping at night, and tried to control everyone by crying. Contrary to the decision of the authorities, Paula continued to live with her parents in October 2019, only spending a few nights at her uncle's house. This failed arrangement was linked to the abuse Paula suffered, which began in 2017, shortly after Leonardo left Ecuador. The mistreatment likely started when Andreina began a relationship with Andreas. More than 40 witnesses testified in court, confirming that Paula was a victim of abuse for at least 3 years of her short life. At the final court hearing, Andreina took full responsibility for abusing Paula, claiming she alone was responsible for the child's injuries. She admitted to physically punishing Paula with a belt and her fists. By doing so, Andreina attempted to exonerate her partner, stating he was innocent and had no involvement in the abuse. Andreina also revealed that she punished Paula because the child's presence was causing problems in her new relationship. She feared that if she broke up with her new husband, she would lose financial stability and be forced back onto the streets. As a result, caring for Paula was her lowest priority. After learning about Paula's background, the judges were concerned about the well-being of the couple's newborn son, but it's clear that he was not abused like Paula was. Andreas has consistently exercised his right to remain silent, making no statements about the incident since his arrest. By February 3, 2021, Paula's trial had concluded and the couple was sentenced. Both were found guilty of murdering the girl with a maximum sentence of 13 years. The original attorneys and the prosecution demanded the maximum punishment, but the chief judge considered an aggravating factor. Paula's age, just 4 years old, made her vulnerable and unable to defend herself. As a result, the judge sentenced Andreina and Andreas to 17 years and 4 months in prison. Under Ecuadorian law, the convicted couple had 3 days to appeal the verdict, which they were expected to do immediately. Although Andreina received a 17-year sentence, she remained on house arrest and didn't go to jail, as she exercised her right to appeal. Now a higher court must confirm her sentence for incarceration. She is still cooperating with the authorities, following the original guidelines. However, Andreas was arrested when he arrived at the hospital with a deceased girl. The fact that Andreina remains at large is causing widespread outrage and anger, particularly for Leonardo, who is concerned that she might use this opportunity to evade justice. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Austin Harf. Austin Harf was born on December 21, 1996, in Palm Beach, Florida, to a wealthy and respected family of doctors. His father was a successful dentist with multiple private clinics, and his mother was a leading pharmaceutical specialist. The family lived in a large, luxurious oceanfront home. When Austin was 13, his parents divorced, and his father moved out of the family home into a new residence with his new partner, who soon became his wife. Austin and his siblings stayed with their mother, but their father remained involved in their lives and provided financial support. Within a year, Austin's mother also remarried, and her new husband moved in with them. Although Austin struggled with his parents' divorce, he continued to excel academically and athletically. Austin dreamed of becoming a doctor like his parents and hoped to attend a prestigious medical school. In high school, he was both an honor student and an outcast. Despite his transformation into a tall, muscular, and charming young man, he remained shy and struggled to make friends and form romantic relationships. In his teenage diary, Austin wrote about feeling isolated at school, where his classmates labeled him a nerd and bullied him. He hoped that things would improve when he went to college, changed his social circle, and moved away from home. A few months before graduating from high school, Austin discovered that he had been accepted into the University of Florida's 4-year medical program. During his teenage years, Austin kept a personal diary where he confided about being ostracized by his classmates, who called him a nerd and teased him relentlessly. He harbored hope that his life would improve once he entered college, formed new friendships, and gained independence from his parents. As he approached the end of high school, Austin received the exciting news that he had been accepted into the University of Florida's esteemed 4-year medical program. Austin's successful program completion paved the way for promising career opportunities and the chance to attend any U.S. medical school. Overjoyed that his dream had come true, he began his college journey with his parents' support. In a vlog, he shared his transition to independent adult life, but despite this new chapter, his shyness persisted, making it difficult for him to connect with peers. Austin briefly dated a girl, but she ended the relationship due to concerns about his behavior. Instead, he focused on bodybuilding during his freshman year, dedicating significant time to the gym and achieving impressive results, including developing strong muscles. However, his success was not solely due to his hard work and perseverance. He had also started using steroids regularly. Austin started a YouTube channel in the spring of 2016, where he posted various videos. Some were about sports and bodybuilding, while others featured him singing and playing the guitar, doing cover versions of popular songs, and mimicking famous artists. He also shared his thoughts on life and philosophy. However, over time, Austin's videos became increasingly concerning. He began to advise his followers against using steroids, claiming they could drive people insane. He also talked about having a crazy and normal side, and seemed confused by these different personalities. In some videos, he would speak in different accents, change his tone of voice, or burst into tears for no reason. His mood and facial expressions would also change suddenly, making it seem like he was just making faces at the camera. Looking back, experts believe that Austin was desperately trying to ask for help in his videos. The channel became his only outlet for expressing his feelings, as he struggled to make friends during his studies. Unfortunately, the videos also document his gradual descent into madness, with his behavior becoming more provocative, aggressive, and sensational. Many of his subscribers suspected that he was using controlled substances and recording his videos while under their influence. Austin's subscribers questioned him about his suspicious behavior, but he denied using drugs, citing his athletic background. However, his actions told a different story, with some even speculating that he might have a dissociative identity disorder. Meanwhile, when Austin returned home for summer break, his mother and sister were shocked by the drastic changes in him. Over the past year, Austin had undergone a dramatic physical transformation, building significant muscle mass. But the changes went beyond his physique. He had become increasingly odd, speaking nonsensically, and claiming he no longer needed sleep. At first, his family dismissed his claims, but they were forced to take him seriously when he insisted on patrolling the house at night, supposedly to protect them from dark forces. Austin followed through on his promise, wandering the house until morning, leaving his family concerned and confused. Every hour, Austin would check on his mother and sister, loudly reassuring them that they could sleep safely because he was watching over them. The next morning, his mother had a straightforward conversation with him, directly asking if he was using drugs. Austin honestly admitted that he had tried nearly every drug over the past year, explaining how each one affected him. He mentioned a powerful synthetic drug that caused intense hallucinations, violent outbursts, and could even be fatal. Despite this, Austin promised his mother that it was behind him and he no longer used the drug that had driven him to madness. After listening to her son, Mrs. Harif made a critical mistake. She didn't seek help from medical professionals, deciding instead to handle the situation on her own. As a pharmacist, she took matters into her own hands, giving Austin a sedative and a sleeping pill, thinking it would calm him down and help him sleep after a restless night. Austin continued to patrol the house every night, assuring its occupants that everything was fine and there was no need to worry. This went on for weeks, but the mother refused to seek professional help or tell her ex-husband about the situation. On the morning of August 13th, Austin unexpectedly visited a former classmate who lived nearby. The classmate was surprised by the unannounced visit, especially since they hadn't seen each other in over a year. When asked why he came, Austin claimed he had forgotten his birth year and urgently needed to know the answer. The classmate told him he was born in 1996. Austin then suddenly turned around and left without saying a word. His strange behavior frightened and confused the classmate, who immediately called Mrs. Harif to share what had happened and ask if Austin might be using drugs. She grew concerned about her son's behavior and decided to call her ex-husband, who was working in another state. She shared her worries with him, and he immediately flew to Florida to discuss the situation with their son. After talking to him, the father suggested that their son voluntarily check into a clinic for an evaluation, but the son refused. The father then had a heartfelt conversation with the mother, and together they decided to seek compulsory examination and treatment for their son at a drug rehabilitation or psychiatric facility. Unfortunately, they couldn't act fast enough. The next day, Austin's friends invited him to join them at the beach, taking advantage of the hot weather. His mother asked Haley to accompany her brother to keep an eye on him. Austin was thrilled about the outing, but he dressed unusually warmly, as if preparing for a trip to the mountains. He wore a thick athletic hoodie, long-sleeved pants, boots, and ski goggles. His friends were initially silent when they saw him, then burst out laughing. A few seconds later, the group started teasing Austin about his outfit, asking if he was okay. Austin's anger surged, and he threatened to harm one of them if they thought he was crazy. Although they didn't take him seriously, they backed off to be safe. Haley noticed her brother was on the edge and decided to intervene. She took him aside for a private conversation, where Austin revealed a shocking secret. He was half human, half wild animal, immortal, and possessed superhuman strength. Haley was frightened, but tried to stay calm to avoid provoking Austin further. Despite the intense conversation, Austin acted normally at the beach, joking and playing volleyball with friends. As the evening drew to a close, the group said their goodbyes and headed their separate ways. Austin and Haley went to a nearby restaurant to meet their father and his wife. On the way, Austin told Haley he wanted to test his immortality and then headed towards a busy highway, planning to cross it recklessly through the fast-moving traffic. Haley intervened when she realized what was happening and pulled her brother away, urging him to hurry because they had a prior commitment. Austin agreed not to keep anyone waiting and quietly followed his sister. During dinner, Austin's behavior was peculiar. He got up from the table several times, went outside, and looked around nervously, as if he feared someone was watching him. Upon returning, he revealed his immortality to his father and stepmother. When his father suggested seeking professional help, Austin became defensive, insisting he wasn't crazy, and in a fit of anger, pushed his father and stormed out of the restaurant. A young man's brutal attack on an elderly couple and their neighbor is a terrifying incident that unfolded like a horror movie. After leaving a restaurant, the young man, Austin, walked several miles until he stumbled upon an open garage in an unfamiliar neighborhood. Inside the garage was an elderly couple, John Stevens, 59, and Michelle Mishcon Stevens, 56, who were preparing for a quiet movie night. They married for over 25 years, had 3 adult children, and were enjoying their retirement. On this particular evening, John had gone for a walk with their dog, while Michelle set up for their usual movie night. When Michelle saw Austin on their lawn, she didn't feel threatened and even offered to help him. However, the situation took a dark turn. Their neighbor, Jeffrey Pfizer, who lived across the street and was friendly with the Stevens, heard strange noises outside around 9 p.m. He looked into the yard and was met with Michelle's blood-curdling scream. Without hesitation, Jeffrey rushed to help his neighbors, where he saw a tall, large young man attacking an elderly woman by her open garage. Jeffrey tried to intervene, but the young man was incredibly strong and knocked him to the ground. As Jeffrey struggled to get up, the assailant stabbed him multiple times in the back and shoulder. Realizing he was outmatched and needed assistance, Jeffrey quickly ran into his friend's house to distract the attacker and lead him away from himself. He escaped through the back door and made his way to his own home. Once inside, he realized the assailant had not followed him and had returned to the neighbor's house, where Michelle was being attacked. Jeffrey immediately called the police and emergency services, reporting that he and his elderly neighbor had been victims of an armed attack by a stranger with a knife. After speaking with the emergency operator, Jeffrey fell silent, listening carefully. He soon became convinced that the attacker was no longer outside his door, but had remained at the neighbor's house. The assailant began making loud animal-like noises, similar to a wild beast growling, accompanied by screams of terror and moans. Tragically, the police took about 10 minutes to arrive, but by then it was too late. The assault had turned fatal, and the outcome was devastating. The officers were met with a horrific and inexplicable scene upon approaching the garage. 2 officers drew their weapons as they entered, but froze in shock at the doorway. Before them lay the lifeless body of Michelle Mishcon Stevens, the homeowner, in a pool of blood. The autopsy would later reveal that she had suffered multiple blunt force traumas to the head and a stab wound to the chest. As they ventured further into the dimly lit garage, they spotted 2 more individuals on the ground. It took a moment for the officers to comprehend the disturbing scene. One man was lying on the ground, desperately crying out for help in a strained voice. Above him, another man was pinning him down, grasping his neck with one hand and tilting his head back with the other. The officers ordered the attacker to release the victim, threatening to shoot if necessary, but the assailant didn't respond. Due to the risk of hitting the victim, firing was not an option. Instead, one officer pulled out a taser, warning the attacker that he was about to be stunned. As the officer moved closer, he was met with a gruesome sight. The attacker was not only holding the victim down, but was also biting his face, clutching his head and neck tightly. The victim was John Stevens, Michelle's husband, and he was lying in a vast pool of blood. Part of his left cheek was missing, and his lip, nose, and ear were severely mutilated, seemingly chewed off. An elderly man was severely attacked and unable to move, silently pleading for help. The officer tried to stop the attacker by using a taser, but it had no effect. The attacker continued to viciously bite the victim's face, even after receiving a kick to the face. Multiple kicks did not deter him. Additional police officers arrived, including one with a police dog, which was released to subdue the attacker. The dog bit the attacker's arm, but he showed no signs of feeling pain and managed to break free, causing himself further injury. Finally, a powerful kick from an officer disoriented the attacker long enough to allow him to be handcuffed. Immediately after being restrained, the attacker claimed he felt unwell, possibly due to something he had eaten, before losing consciousness and convulsing. 4 people were taken to the hospital after a violent incident. Mrs. Stevens died at the scene, and her husband died on the way to the hospital due to severe injuries from stab wounds. The injured neighbor, who reported the incident, survived but suffered permanent nerve and tendon damage to his right hand. The attacker, Austin Harif, fell into a coma after drinking weed killer from a bottle in the garage, which severely burned his esophagus and stomach. He spent several days close to death, but was eventually saved. When he woke up 2 weeks later, he claimed to have no memory of the events. Gradually, Austin started to remember the argument with his father and walking away. He then recalled seeing a ghost-like figure leading him through dark alleys until he saw a lantern near the Stevens garage, where he attacked Mrs. Stevens. He claimed to have seen her as evil and tried to rid her of it. When the neighbor, Jeffrey Fisher, intervened, Austin perceived him as a demon and attacked him with a knife. After Fisher escaped, Austin continued to assault Mrs. Stevens until she showed no signs of life. He then drank from the bottle thinking it was alcohol, and soon heard a dog barking and a man's voice. Austin claimed no memory of what happened next. At the hospital, tests revealed no drugs, medication, or alcohol in Austin's blood, leading to suspicions of a psychotic break. The case attracted widespread media attention due to its brutality and uncertainty. While some believed Austin was faking insanity to avoid punishment, a psychological expert concluded that he had a mental illness that led to an acute psychotic episode. However, the prosecutor did not believe Austin met the legal definition of insanity at the time of the crime. Suggestions arose that Austin's mental health had deteriorated due to drug use and social difficulties, but he was clean at the time of the crime. Austin's father revealed a family history of schizophrenia, and a rare disorder called clinical lycanthropy delusion was suspected, which might explain Austin's wild behavior. However, no psychiatrists confirmed the diagnosis. After treatment, Austin was transferred to jail, where he awaits trial. His lawyers claim he is mentally ill, while the relatives of the victims hope he will be found competent and sentenced to death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Diane Holick. Diane Tammy Holick was born in 1958 in New York City and was known to her friends and family as a hardworking and joyful person. Her work ethic led to financial stability and her successful career. For over 20 years, she worked at IBM, a leading global technology company. In 1996, she relocated to Austin, Texas, where she held a senior position that allowed her to work remotely from her home office. Diane purchased a luxurious home in the suburbs of Austin and lived a privileged life, often hosting wine tastings, dining at upscale restaurants, and frequenting dance clubs. She was also involved in charity work and made efforts to improve her personal life. However, her life took a turn in mid-November 2001 when a severe storm warning was issued for Texas, bringing heavy rain and tornadoes to the Austin area. As a result, Diane worked from home on the morning of November 16th, but suddenly became unresponsive during a scheduled work call. Diane had multiple phones, but she wasn't answering any of them. Her co-workers left messages asking her to call back, but when she didn't respond, they grew concerned. They contacted the police department and requested that someone check on Diane at her home. When the officers arrived, Diane's neighbor offered a spare key, allowing the police to enter the house. Inside, they found an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of dogs emerging from the kitchen. As the police searched the house, they found Diane's body in the bedroom on the second floor. The detectives were called to the scene, and they were struck by the unusual cleanliness of the crime scene. There were no signs of theft, struggle, or forced entry. Diane's body was fully dressed and lying next to her bed. The detectives quickly realized that they were dealing with a crime. The investigation revealed distinct strangulation marks on Diane's neck, likely caused by a rope or similar object. Her wrists also showed signs of being bound with cable ties. The cleanliness of the house, the lack of stolen valuables, and the absence of forced entry led the detectives to believe that Diane's killer was someone she knew and trusted. They suspected that the killer was someone she had let into her home voluntarily. An investigation into Diane's death revealed no signs of forced intimacy, but detectives did find suspicious dark spots and red stains on the carpet near the bedroom entrance. A towel on the back of the sofa in the living room caught their attention due to its mismatch with the otherwise clean and orderly surroundings, prompting them to send it to the laboratory for examination. Diane's acquaintances reported that she had no known enemies, and the police discovered that she was in a romantic relationship with Dennis Conley, a man she had plans to spend her life with. Diane had been married before, but that marriage ended quickly. She met Dennis through a dating service, and he had 2 children from a previous marriage. Dennis was a businessman living in Houston, 150 miles from Austin, where Diane resided. Despite the distance, Diane and Dennis formed a close bond, with Dennis proposing to her after 2 months with a valuable platinum ring. However, according to Diane's friends, the relationship began to decline recently. Diane had been feeling controlled by Dennis at times. Diane was also troubled by the decision to relocate to Houston, which meant leaving her home in the suburbs of Austin. She put her house up for sale, but realtors struggled to find a buyer willing to pay the asking price of $435,000. This led detectives to suspect that Dennis might be involved in Diane's death, prompting them to invite him to the police station for a conversation. Dennis agreed to speak with them without a lawyer. The medical examiner determined that Diane died sometime between 3 p.m. on November 15th and 3 a.m. on November 16th. Notably, the wedding ring Dennis had given her was missing from her finger, while her other jewelry remained untouched in the bedroom. This raised questions about the killer's motives and whether the ring was removed to mislead investigators. During the police interview, Dennis appeared to be a grieving man. He was asked about his relationship with Diane and his whereabouts on the day of her death and the day her body was found. Dennis claimed he was in Houston at the time. He stated that he last spoke with Diane on the morning of November 15th and spent the rest of the day at work without contacting her again. When he couldn't reach Diane the next morning, he left a message on her voicemail. The police took Dennis' fingerprints and DNA sample, but ultimately cleared him as a suspect after verifying his alibi. He had not left the city, so the detectives had to expand their search for a new lead. Further inquiry revealed that an unknown man had inspected Diane's house a few days before her death, claiming to be a potential buyer. He had planned to return with his wife to make a joint purchase decision. This clue became a top priority for the police, who began questioning the owners of properties for sale in the area, hoping that someone may have seen this mysterious buyer. Several women in the area reported that a suspicious man had visited their homes around the time of Diane's murder. He, described as being 35 to 45 years old with a large nose and dark hair, had arrived unaccompanied by a real estate agent. 6 of the women refused to let him in, but one allowed him to enter and view her home. She who let him in reported that he acted strangely, showing no interest in the layout of the house or its features. Instead, he specifically asked to see the bedroom on the 2nd floor. When she became uncomfortable and asked him to leave, he introduced himself as Walter Miller. The police searched their databases for anyone matching the name Walter Miller, but the individuals they found did not match his age or appearance. A forensic artist created a sketch of the suspect based on the women's descriptions. Diane's killer removed the cable ties that had bound her hands, but the rationale behind this action is unclear. Did he know his victim personally? A subsequent autopsy revealed no evidence of forced intimacy or assault, yet the police remained vigilant, returning to the crime scene to search for potential traces of semen. However, these efforts yielded nothing. A police sketch of a potential suspect in the Diane Holick case was broadcast on the evening news, urging anyone who recognized the person to come forward. One of the few leads investigators had was a towel from Diane's house with a few short hairs on it. But the hairs were rootless, making it impossible to obtain a complete DNA sample. A woman contacted the police after seeing the sketch and reported a similar encounter. She and her husband had put their house up for sale 6 months prior, and a man had come to visit, claiming he wanted to buy the house for cash and needed to see it first. However, she refused to let him in, and he left. 2 months later, the same man returned to her doorstep and introduced himself as Jim Taylor. She was home alone with her young daughter, as her husband had just left for work. He asked to look around the house, but she denied his request again. This time, he became angry and aggressive, yelling and demanding to be let in. She immediately recalled the encounter and remembered writing down his name and the license plate number of his minivan. The police now had a crucial lead to investigate. A search of the vehicle's registration revealed that the owner was not Jim Taylor, but Patrick Anthony Russo. Initially, Russo seemed like an unlikely suspect. He was a married man with 2 children, lived 40 minutes outside of Austin, and was a member of a church music band. However, a deeper look into his past revealed a disturbing history of violent crimes against women. Russo had been convicted of a series of attacks, including one that involved abducting and attempting to strangle a victim with cable ties. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison but was released on parole after serving only 8 years. While in prison, he met his future wife, Janet, a church volunteer. The police found it hard to believe that Russo's connection to the case was mere coincidence. The police visited Anthony Russo's house with a search warrant, and he seemed unsurprised by their arrival. Although they found no evidence of Diane's belongings, including her ring, in his house or minivan, a neighbor reported seeing a similar vehicle at Diane's house on the day she died. In the utility room, investigators discovered cable ties identical to those that left marks on Diane's wrists. However, these ties are widely available at hardware stores. The police asked Anthony to come to the station for further questioning, where they inquired about his whereabouts on November 15th and 16th. Anthony claimed that on the 15th, he drove to Austin to visit a religious radio station but was unable to enter because no one answered the door. Notably, the radio station was near Diane's house. He stated that he left the station around 4 p.m. but got lost due to a hurricane, arriving home around 6 p.m. This alibi is questionable, as the forensic medical expert reported that Diane died between 3 p.m. and 3 a.m. Russo was questioned by the police about whether he was looking to buy a house. He claimed he had not inquired about any properties for buy, which would later prove to be an important statement. When shown a photo of Diane, Russo remained impassive and denied having met her. With no evidence connecting him to the crime, the police had no choice but to release him. However, when detectives investigated further by visiting a radio station Russo had mentioned, they discovered that his previous statement was a fabrication. The employees at a local business explained that they didn't lock the doors during a tornado warning because a large crowd had gathered in the lobby. Meanwhile, a woman who was selling her house contacted the police after encountering a man who resembled the suspect in a recent crime. She had been at home with her child when he came to her door, claiming to be interested in buying a house. He was holding a pamphlet with real estate listings, including her own home. She allowed him into her home, but when she showed him a bedroom, he attempted to attack her. However, he quickly fled when he heard her child crying in the next room. She retained the pamphlet, which was later given to the police. They found a clear fingerprint on the pamphlet, which belonged to Anthony Russo. Russo denied ever looking at houses for sale, but the fingerprint proved he had lied to the police. Russo's false statement was a misdemeanor, and since he was still on probation, it was a violation of his parole conditions. The police arrested him, fearing that he might flee while they searched for evidence linking him to the death of Diane. To ensure public safety, the authorities decided to keep Russo in custody. The police were able to locate 15 women who had showed homes to a man who matched Anthony Russo's description. All 15 women were asked to identify the suspect from a lineup of 5 men who were similarly dressed and had similar appearances. However, only 10 of the women were able to positively identify Russo as he who had visited them to view homes. The remaining 5 women were unable to make an identification. Despite this, the police still had reason to believe Russo was involved in the crime and brought him in for further questioning. During the interrogation, Russo continued to deny any involvement in the crime, but eventually stopped answering questions and requested to see his wife. Meanwhile, the police received the results of a DNA analysis from the laboratory. The results showed that a hair found on a towel at the victim's home matched Russo's DNA profile. While this was a significant piece of evidence, it was not conclusive, as there was a small chance that the hair could have belonged to someone else with the same DNA profile. Despite the accumulation of circumstantial evidence, the police still lacked a direct link between Russo and the victim's death. Investigation revealed 2 key pieces of evidence that implicated in Diane's death. Firstly, cell phone data placed Russo in the same area as Diane on the day she died. Secondly, a thorough examination of Russo's home computer uncovered a disturbing search history. Russo frequently visited an adult website where he consumed content explicitly depicting strangulation during intimate activities. Furthermore, the website required subscription, indicating that Russo actively sought out this material and was willing to pay for it. 2 days prior to Diane's death, Russo had accessed a particular story on the website that told the tale of a man who, under the guise of being a buyer, infiltrated a lonely woman's home, strangled her, and then stole valuables to make the crime appear as a robbery, thus disguising his true motive of satiating his desire for strangulation. Detectives delved into Russo's financial life and found he and his wife had a mere $2,000 in savings and were still making mortgage payments on their current home, clearly indicating he was in no position to buy a new house. Without concrete evidence, police arrested Russo and charged him with the murder of Diane Hollick nearly 2.5 years after her death, which took place on November 15, 2001. In court, 14 women testifying under oath that Russo had approached them about viewing homes, often visiting them in person on the day of the murder. Notably, these women all matched a specific profile, suggesting Russo had been observing them beforehand. While most refused him entry, one woman allowed him in initially but soon asked him to leave due to his strange demeanor. Russo's interest in homes was not random, as he specifically sought out homes occupied by women of a particular age group. The prosecution presented evidence that Russo visited homes for sale, often targeting women who lived alone. Russo visited Diane's house again, likely at her invitation, but this time with a specific intention. He had planned his actions carefully to avoid leaving any evidence. On a rainy day, Diane offered him a towel to dry off, which he casually discarded on the back of the sofa. As she showed him around the house, Russo attacked her on the second floor. Prosecutors believed that Russo derived pleasure from the act of strangulation, which ultimately led to Diane's death. Before leaving the scene, Russo took cable ties and Diane's wedding ring, which were never found by the police. He used a spare key hidden at the front door to lock up behind him. This was the prosecution's version of events. At the trial, Russo's current and former wives testified that he had a history of enjoying the act of strangulation. It's worth noting that Russo had a prior conviction for a similar crime. After deliberating for 11 hours, the jury found Patrick Anthony Russo guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison, but never admitted to his guilt, despite his history of similar crimes. Russo will become eligible for parole again and can submit his initial petition in 2044. At that point, he will be approximately 80 years old. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Midsi Sanchez. Midsi Sanchez was born on August 10, 1992, in Vallejo, California. She grew up in a large, close-knit family with 2 brothers and a sister. Midsi was a cheerful and bright child who enjoyed spending time outdoors with her friends and playing with her siblings from a young age. When she started elementary school, Midsi was quite independent. Her parents allowed her to walk to school with her brother without any adult supervision, as the school was located just a short distance from their home, with most of the route lying along a busy road. On August 10, 2000, Midsi's 8th birthday, she was excited about the celebration party her family had been preparing. She asked her mother if she could skip school for the occasion, but her mother said no. Midsi was upset about it, and around 7:30 a.m., she left her home with her brother. Midsi was supposed to wait for her brother so they could walk home together, but when her brother went outside the school, he couldn't find his sister anywhere. Thinking she had already left without him, he headed home alone, but it turned out that Midsi was not there. Their older sister, who was home at that time, immediately became worried, since Midsi was eagerly anticipating her birthday party, and her absence seemed odd. She waited for some time, hoping that Midsi would eventually show up, and around 4 p.m., she decided to call their mom and tell her about it. Midsi's mother called her school and confirmed she attended all her classes. After contacting family and friends with no luck, Midsi's relatives grew concerned and began searching for her. Family, friends, neighbors, and others joined in, organizing a large search effort. Some walked the streets, while others knocked on doors along the route from school to home. Flyers with Midsi's information were also printed and distributed. Despite all their efforts, they couldn't find her, so Midsi's parents decided to call 911. The police immediately joined the search, and local media started covering the case on the same day of Midsi's disappearance. In recent years, similar incidents had already occurred in their town, where an unknown perpetrator or multiple perpetrators had been kidnapping kids in Vallejo. The most recent case had occurred in December 1999, less than a year before Midsi's disappearance, when 7-year-old Shiana Fairchild, who lived just a few miles from Midsi's house, disappeared on her way to school. Despite all the efforts by the police and the FBI, she was never found. Now, when Midsi vanished on her way home from school, investigators feared the same perpetrator might be involved. Despite the lack of leads at that point, the striking similarities between those cases were already obvious. However, Xana's case remained unsolved, leaving detectives with little to go on. They began re-examining everyone previously considered a suspect in her case, but it yielded no results. The next day, Midsi's disappearance made headlines not only in the local news, but statewide. Everyone feared a serial kidnapper was at large and dreaded the possibility of him getting away with it once again. Mitzi's relatives gave multiple interviews, trying to draw more attention to the case, and her mom also pleaded with the possible abductor to return her daughter safely. The police received many testimony, but none were helpful. However, everything changed a day after Mitzi went missing when something surprising occurred. A man contacted the police, saying he found bloody rags at a garbage dump. Experts confirmed the rags were bed sheets from a Vallejo hotel. They sent the evidence for blood analysis, which would take days. Investigators went to the hotel but couldn't confirm if Mitzi had been there. While waiting for lab results, investigators searched the landfill for more clues but found nothing. The following day, August 12th, the police received another call, and it changed the course of this case. Immediately at around 11 a.m., a man reported driving through an industrial area in Santa Clara when a little girl ran up to his van, screaming that someone was chasing her. She climbed into the van's cabin, and the driver saw a man running in their direction. The girl yelled that he had kidnapped her and wanted to kill her. As soon as she was in the van, the perpetrator turned around, got into his car, and fled. Meanwhile, the girl told the driver her name was Mitzi Sanchez, and he contacted the police. Officers immediately picked her up and drove her to a hospital for examination. They also called her mother and let her speak to her daughter. Soon after, her relatives rushed to the hospital and reunited with Mitzi. Meanwhile, detectives talked to the van driver. The man provided an important lead as he remembered the license plate of the kidnapper's vehicle because it drove off right in front of his van. It was revealed that the van driver was on that road almost by coincidence. He had a day off, but was asked by his supervisor to cover a shift and deliver a load. If he hadn't been there, the suspect might have caught up with Mitzi. The police ran the license plate and identified the car belonging to a 39-year-old man named Curtis Dean Anderson. He had been on law enforcement's radar before, with prior convictions for thefts, kidnapping, and suspicion of other crimes. Investigators were focused on finding the abductor, while their colleagues were getting ready to listen to Mitzi's story. She recounted how on August 10th, after school, she was excited to go home and celebrate her birthday with her family. When her last class ended, Mitzi chose to go home alone without waiting for her brother. Not far from school, she saw a car parked on the side of the road. A man inside was observing her closely in the rearview mirror. Mitzi felt uneasy but dismissed it quickly, thinking it was daytime. She was on a familiar street, and being young, she didn't fully understand the potential danger from strangers. As Mitzi approached the car, the man got out and asked her to help him. He said he needed to grab a roll of tape from under the car seat, explaining that he couldn't bend down himself due to a leg injury from falling off his bike. Despite her uneasy feeling, Mitzi agreed to help. At that time, she couldn't fully comprehend the potential danger posed by the adult man, and her parents had always taught her to help others. As soon as Mitzi reached for the tape, the perpetrator shoved her inside, covered her mouth with his hand, and slammed the door shut. Mitzi tried to scream, but it was too late. The kidnapper drove off in an unknown direction, leaving her to gaze out the window in horror. At one point, they passed Mitzi's home, and she saw her relatives preparing to celebrate her birthday. A few minutes later, the kidnapper pulled into a deserted parking lot. He gave Mitzi new clothes, forced her to change, and discarded her old clothing in a nearby trash bin. He also warned Mitzi not to try to escape, claiming he had a gun and that no one ever managed to get away from him. In the next few hours, he drove Mitzi in an unknown direction. At one point, she asked why he had kidnapped her, and the man simply replied that the same had happened to him when he was a child. When it got dark, he parked again and began covering the car windows with some rags. He then pulled out a chain and secured it to Mitzi's leg with a padlock. The perpetrator then took out a bottle of alcohol and forced her to take a few sips. Mitzi tried to argue with him, but eventually complied with his demand. After that, the man grabbed a camera and took several pictures of Mitzi, then laid down to sleep right in the car. Mitzi tried to keep her eyes open, afraid of falling asleep. She was thinking how to escape, and at one point saw a police car drive past the parking lot, but it was far away, and even if Mitzi had screamed, the officers would never have been able to hear her. The next day, the perpetrator continued driving her around the city. He made her sit on the floor of the car and covered her with sheets to hide her from view. At one point, he stopped and got out for a few minutes. Mitzi tried to free her leg from the chain, but quickly realized it was impossible. She also found a nail file and attempted to unlock the padlock, but it didn't work. When the perpetrator returned to the car and drove away, Mitzi remained trapped. He claimed he had stopped by her parents' house. The kidnapper pretended to be a concerned citizen and asked for flyers to distribute around town. Mitzi was shocked and overwhelmed. She had been so close to home, yet still remained in captivity. Mitzi quickly understood that she needed to unlock the padlock on her chain. She was scared of what the perpetrator might do if she didn't, but she overcame her fear. She took the bunch of keys, chose one that looked like it would work best, and tried to unlock it. She was surprised when it actually worked. Mitzi then freed herself from the chain, with only the car door left standing between her and freedom. Mitzi opened the window and tried to climb out through it, but she encountered another problem. She was so exhausted that she could barely move her legs. Gathering all her strength, she managed to lift herself and leap out of the car. As she crawled around it, she spotted her kidnapper, who immediately noticed her. The man began shouting for her to come back, but Mitzi had no intention of giving up. With her last ounce of energy, she ran in the opposite direction. The perpetrator chased after her, and Mitzi tried to flag down passing cars for help. She waved and screamed, but they all drove past. Despite this, Mitzi kept moving toward her freedom. She had no doubt that if she stopped for even a second, the perpetrator would catch up and harm her. Everything happened very quickly, but for Mitzi, this moment stretched on forever. Eventually, she spotted a van, ran towards it, and jumped right in front of it. The driver quickly stopped, and Mitzi climbed into the cabin. She was shocked, dehydrated, and hungry, but her life was no longer in danger. At the hospital, doctors provided her with the necessary assistance, and soon her entire family arrived to reunite with her. Mitzi's miraculous rescue instantly became the main news story in the city. When she was brought home, thousands of people gathered on her street, applauding her and shouting birthday greetings, which she had missed. Meanwhile, the police were hunting down the kidnapper, whose whereabouts remained unknown. When they showed his photo to Mitzi's mother, she realized she had actually seen him twice. The first time was before her daughter's abduction, when he stood on their street and looked towards their house. The second time was the day after Mitzi's disappearance, when the perpetrator came to her home and asked for flyers. The search for Curtis continued until late evening. Police set up surveillance at all known places he frequented, and eventually, it paid off. He came to a trailer park and was apprehended without resistance. Curtis was booked in jail, awaiting trial, and detectives began investigating his possible connections to other crimes. The man himself told Mitzi she wasn't his first victim, and no one had managed to escape him. Investigators could not believe that this was the suspect's first time committing a crime like this. His actions were calculated and indicated that he had experience in such atrocities. Curtis had a history of kidnapping a woman in 1991 and had been released from prison in 1999. Police were certain that he had killed 7-year-old Gianna Fairchild after his release. There was also no doubt that he intended to kill Mitzi. Moreover, one specific fact directly indicated that it was supposed to happen on the day of her escape. Police learned that Curtis had stopped in the industrial area he used to work in, and that day he visited his former colleagues. He had asked them for a large bag, and detectives immediately realized he planned to dispose of a body in it. After Curtis's arrest, Mitzi struggled to recover for a long time. However, she soon learned that the police were suspecting him of kidnapping Zana, which made her even more uneasy. While Mitzi was glad she managed to escape, she knew the ordeal was far from over. She also worried about the fate of this 7-year-old girl. More than 8 months have passed since her disappearance, and there was no news about Zana's fate. Mitzi wanted to help find her, so just days after her own rescue, she participated in a search operation along with other volunteers. Unfortunately, they couldn't find any new leads on Zana's possible whereabouts. This continued until January 2001, when a human skull was found in the mountains near the city of Santa Cruz. Forensic analysis showed it belonged to Zana, and she was officially declared dead. Mitzi took this news very hard, but ahead of her was another challenge, the trial. It began in April of the same year. Mitzi had to testify before the full courtroom and recount in every detail what Curtis had done to her. He was also present there, but despite all of this, Mitzi managed to fulfill her task in the end. Curtis was sentenced to 251 years in prison, but that wasn't the end of his story. Detectives visited Curtis in jail multiple times and questioned him about possible involvement in other crimes. He confessed to a fellow inmate about kidnapping and killing 8 other girls. The inmate agreed to work with the police and shared Curtis's words in detail. Curtis didn't deny anything but tried to negotiate for privileges, speaking cryptically with detectives. Eventually, he hinted that he had indeed murdered Shiana Fairchild and at least 13 other girls and women. In 2005, he finally fully confessed to Shiana's murder, resulting in an additional 50-year sentence. As for Mitzi, her challenges didn't end with Curtis's trial. Just a few weeks after her rescue, she returned to school, where she faced bullying from other children. They called her the kidnapped girl, said she should have died instead of being saved, and generally behaved extremely inappropriately. As a result, her school years became a heavy burden for her, and along with the tragedy she had experienced, it didn't help in her recovery process. Mitzi also repeatedly joined the searches for other missing children, but more often than not, it ended with the discovery of their bodies. Each time, she felt this tragedy as if it were her own, and ultimately, she couldn't cope with this pressure anymore. Alcohol became her only way to cope with the stress, and with each passing day, Mitzi turned to it more and more frequently. Eventually, she stopped seeing even the slightest chance of returning to a normal life. But one day, everything changed. Mitzi was involved in a serious car accident after a party with friends. She broke her neck and arm and spent 2 weeks in a coma. When she woke up, doctors informed her that she is pregnant and would have a daughter. This news turned her life upside down, and Mitzi found the strength to change it for the better once again. She decided to dedicate all her time not only to her daughter, but also to other children who became victims of various crimes. She founded a non-profit organization that continues to provide assistance to those in need to this day. As for Curtis, he died of illness in 2007, just 6 years after being sentenced. The only reason the detectives regretted it was the fact that they had not managed to obtain full confessions from him regarding other cases he was suspected of, although they still haven't been solved. The police continue to consider his involvement highly probable. It is worth mentioning that Curtis had a son who followed in his father's footsteps. He was convicted of murder, and in 2019, his own life ended in prison. Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Tristan Borlase. On April 10, 2019, a significant tragedy occurred involving 17-year-old Tristan Borlase. This teenager, from a devout family, violently attacked and killed his relatives at their home in Deep Gap, North Carolina. On that Wednesday evening, emergency services received a call from a young woman. She reported a large amount of blood in her home and mentioned that her parents and younger brother were missing. Attempts to reach them had been unsuccessful. Police officers immediately responded to the situation, driving to the family home in Deep Gap, located near the Watauga and Wilkes County border. Upon arrival, they discovered blood on the walkway leading to the house, on the mat by the front door, and trailing inside up the stairs. As officers searched outside the home, they found a man's body covered with leaves under a hammock. The man had multiple stab wounds. Later that night, at about 10:30 p.m., authorities found the family's pickup truck concealed in the woods. Inside was the woman's body, covered with a blanket and bags of mulch placed on top of her. Jeffrey Burkett, Tristan's father, was born on April 16, 1975. He served as pastor of Pist Bible Fellowship Church, a conservative Protestant movement with Mennonite roots. Tristan grew up in an environment emphasizing personal piety and constant awareness of God's watchful eye. Serious Bible study sessions and moral instructions formed the basis of his upbringing. Even entertainment like laughter or colorful clothing was frowned upon within this community. Things such as good works, charity, missionary work, love for one's enemies, and renunciation of all forms of violence were highly valued virtues. Jeffrey upheld these principles as well, since he was raised under similar circumstances by Pastor Harry Boras. As a boy and young man, Jeffrey exemplified kindness, gentleness, and patience. During his youth as a young adult man, Jeffrey worked at Big Surf Water Park located on Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri during summer breaks from schooling routines back then. On his first day of work, the young man encountered a charming and meek girl named Tanya Mae Trandom. She was of the same age, had similar views, and shared almost identical upbringing with him. Tanya, like Jeffrey, was raised in a family where Christian values were of utmost importance. A patient and humble girl, she saw in the devout man an ideal future husband and a caring father. She gave Jeffrey a picture of an elderly couple holding hands and remarked, "That will be us one day." Jeffrey's mother, Kathy Brown, prayed earnestly that God would bless her son with a wife who loved the Lord wholeheartedly. She believed her prayers were answered when Jeffrey met Tanya. The young couple married and continued living according to the values they were taught in their own families. The photo presented by Tanya was carefully preserved in their family album. Soon after their marriage, the couple welcomed their first child, an adorable girl named Taylor. Not long after Taylor's birth came 3 more children, the youngest being a son named Tristan. Taylor embraced her role as the eldest sibling wholeheartedly. She took care of her brothers and sisters, constantly supporting them. Among all her siblings, she had a special bond with her younger brother Tristan. Despite their age difference, they were inseparable. Jeffrey and Tanya held firm beliefs about parenting, viewing it as their mission to instill Christian values in their children's hearts. As their 4 children grew older, they decided to extend their family further by adopting 4 more boys from an orphanage. Open-hearted and loving according to others' descriptions, their family expanded to include 8 children: Taylor, twins Kay and Alexis, Misery, Ale, Stephen, Miku, and Tristan. In line with the family's religious beliefs, children were not permitted to use cell phones or social networks until reaching a certain age. They emphasized simplicity in needs and desires as well. Additionally, boys were forbidden to engage in romantic relationships until they completed high school at 18 years old. Bible study sessions and other religious activities were mandatory components of their upbringing. Despite these guidelines rooted in asceticism and discipline, the children grew up like any other boys and girls, with love and support from their devoted parents guiding them along the way. Parents made no distinction between native and adopted children. They all received the same attention, care, and affection. The loving mother fostered a harmonious atmosphere, carefully monitoring the internal relationships among brothers and sisters. She prayed frequently and engaged in various good deeds. The couple believed in nurturing virtue through their actions and instilled mercy in their children by setting an example. When a hurricane struck Haiti, Tanya sold her expensive wedding ring and donated the proceeds to a foundation dedicated to building housing for the victims. In place of her costly ring, she acquired a simple, modest one. In 2015, Taylor graduated from high school and moved to Boone to attend Appalachian State University. This event was particularly difficult for Tristan, as he lost his closest companion and found himself alone. Although Taylor returned home at every opportunity, she now had her own independent life, leaving Tristan with the same old rules and routines that he'd always opposed. Tristan had long rebelled against the restrictions his parents imposed since childhood and disagreed with their religious views. He was particularly frustrated by the lack of a cell phone and the inability to connect with peers on social networks, an integral part of modern teenage life. After Taylor's departure, quarrels with his parents increased. In December 2017, there were significant changes within the family's life. Jeffrey, his wife, and their children moved to a new house with a large lot in Deep Gap, Watauga County, North Carolina. The house was situated on a dirt road leading into a wooded area and offered much more space than their previous home. Additionally, it was located just under 2 miles from Robin's residence, Tanya's mother, and the children's grandmother, making it easy to seek her help when needed for looking after the youngest children. He attended the local high school and began participating in and field. Other kids took jobs as counselors at summer camps. At first glance, it might have seemed that there was never any trouble in the Borlas household. Over time, Tristan's behavior became troubling. In 2018, the school insisted on several consultations with a psychologist due to anger issues and a lack of control. By 2019, when Tristan was in high school, he started having trouble understanding some school subjects. These difficulties grew with each passing day. From being a diligent student who always participated in school activities before the move, he turned into an indifferent and withdrawn teenager with a lack of interest in his studies. Tristan began arriving late for lessons and showed no desire to learn at all. It got to the point where he would put his headphones on during class and sit with an absent expression. Some teachers tried to help Tristan, and he even made contact, but everything ended with unchanged indifference. At home, Tristan's behavior also became a concern. By this time, he had everything but constantly argued with his parents about his cell phone and access to social networks. He spent considerable time on the internet. On his Instagram account, he referred to himself as a musician. His sister Taylor remained interested in her siblings' lives and noticed that Tristan quarreled more frequently with their parents and argued about religious topics with their mother. She also learned of his other problems at school. The sister attempted to talk to her brother, but realized their former closeness was gone. After some time, Tristan befriended a girl from the religious community named Evelyn Faith Jackson. They began meeting without particularly observing prohibitions on intimate relations. Sometimes they even smoked forbidden substances together. Tristan expressed complaints about his mother's nightly discussions regarding his behavior, which left him feeling tired and unable to concentrate in school. The young man grew very concerned that many of his faults caused him not to live up to his mother's expectations. She can't take pride in him, told that he can be himself with his father, but it's different with his mother. On April 10, 2019, a lot of secrets from Tristan's life came to light. Surveillance cameras were installed in the barn. Tristan's old cell phone, which he occasionally used without his parents knowing, was used as an access point. On this particular day, Tanya took the phone for some reason and discovered text messages indicating her son was having inappropriate conversations with girls and discussing illegal drugs. Tristan was at school when he noticed his phone blinking with incoming messages. His shocked parents confronted him through a family chat about what they had found on the old phone. That same day, Sher King, an English teacher in Tristan's class, called his mother to complain about his grades and behavior. During the trial, it was revealed that Tanya Borlas had called Miss King back, informing her that she and her husband would soon come to the school to pick Tristan up to discuss his academic performance. Miss King conveyed this message to Tristan, who was quite surprised by the news. The couple left their youngest child with his grandmother and headed to the middle school to address these issues. The ride home was silent. At trial, Tristan testified that his mother appeared tense and frowned frequently while going through his phone. A conversation ensued at home for about an hour and a half. Afterward, Tanya texted her mother stating that although they had taken away Tristan's phone and car keys until his grades and behavior improved, he did not seem upset by this. She informed her mother that she would be coming soon to pick up the younger child. This message was sent at 4 p.m., after which it seems the discussion continued. From Tristan's account, he and his mother talked about the importance of doing well in school and maintaining cleanliness at home. He was forced to listen and realized there was a lot in him needing correction. They even made a list of qualities should develop to become a better person: compassion, honesty. This list would later be found by the police. At one point, Tristan said his mother approached him from behind, put her arm around his neck, and applied pressure. He instinctively jumped up, turned around, and accidentally hit her. According to him, his mother had never done anything like that before, so he reacted that way. His mother was startled by the blow, grabbed what he thought were scissors from a shelf, and moved toward her son. In shock at what was happening, he stabbed her thinking he was defending himself and ran to his father for help. Later forensic examination found no evidence on Tristan's neck, indicating his mother strangled him. During the trial, the prosecution showed photos of Tristan Boris's neck taken by the medical examiner that displayed a broken neck bone. On the other hand, the psychologist would explain during the trial that in his opinion Tristan Boris was mentally sane at the time of the crime, but suffered from a severely impaired cognitive state. He was experiencing depersonalization, derealization, and felt events were unreal. However, the court and jury, they would disregard the psychologist's opinion, finding Tristan to be a skillful manipulator and socially dangerous individual. According to Tristan, he did not understand what was happening, or why his father was running away from him, or why he stabbed him when he caught up even though he begged for help. He remembered his father picking up a rock saying, "Tristan, don't," but thought his father would rather let him be killed than try to harm him. Neighbors later reported hearing loud screams on the Boris property at about 5:30 p.m. that Wednesday. After it was over, Tristan returned to the house where he vomited, indicating severe stress, not cold-blooded, calculated murder in the psychologist's opinion. The jury disagreed with the psychologist's opinion because they had seen the forensic medical examiner's reports during the trial. Jeffrey B.'s autopsy report detailed multiple stab wounds to his left chest back, slash wounds his arms and hands, and abrasions his skull and forehead. Tanya Borla's autopsy report showed that she had multiple wounds in her left chest and arm, while as injuries likely sustained from neck compression. These findings suggested that the parents were defending themselves rather than attacking. Tristan had an opportunity to escape from his mother if he felt threatened. Even if the mother experienced a sudden lapse of judgment or misperceived self-defense, the father's murder and subsequent actions appeared different. Tristan returned home, removed his mother's body, placed it in a truck under a tarp, cleaned the crime scene for about an hour, and even used a hose to wash down the porch. Around 8:30 p.m., Tristan went to his grandmother's house to pick up his younger brother. His brother Robin thought this was very strange. Tristan explained that his parents urgently needed to go to the store and apologized for not having time to stop by to pick up his brother. About 20 minutes later, Robin received a call from another grandson who complained that their parents were not answering the phone and hadn't come to pick him up from work as usual. Grandma called Alexis and asked her to retrieve her brother. They agreed to meet at Jeffrey and Tanya's house to figure out what had happened. When they arrived at the house, Robin noticed blood on the porch, but wasn't overly concerned since the couple raised animals there. She went inside to get a flashlight to check on them and discovered blood everywhere. At this point, Alexis ran into the house reporting she found some kind of body under a hammock near the animal barn and thought she saw Tristan with blood on his face in a getaway car. Alexis called emergency services. The operator instructed her and all family members to lock themselves in the car and wait for the police. The police arrived 10 minutes later. After several hours of waiting outside and talking to officers, they were taken to the station where they were informed that Jeffrey and Tanya Barassi had been found dead. While examining the crime scene, detectives found a computer interface in the home. It connected the video surveillance system inside the house to the monitors. Detectives saw a screen with a grid of various cameras broadcasting live video feeds. They immediately requested a warrant to obtain credentials from the servicing company. Meanwhile, Tristan contacted his girlfriend Evelyn and went over to her home. She noticed he seemed worried and had a few scratches on his forehead and arms. Tristan assured her that he had only argued with his parents and got the scratches while playing with his dog. Evelyn described Tristan's injuries: 3 scratches on his forehead, a wound on his hand, a cut on his finger, and a bruised fingernail. Right after the crime, Tristan posted a photo of his injuries on Snapchat, saying he was hurt by his father's dog. According to Evelyn, this photo matched what she saw that evening. Tristan stayed over that night. The next morning, they went to Walmart and McDonald's, but decided against going to school. Evelyn thought Tristan just wanted some time away from his parents, so she suggested staying with one of her relatives for a while. He agreed, and they traveled to another state. On April 11th, Sheriff's Office personnel obtained the username and password to the Barassi home's video surveillance system. After reviewing the camera footage, they learned about the circumstances of the crime. Police obtained a warrant for Tristan's arrest and turned over details about their vehicle. He allegedly drove away to the National Crime Information Center. A search of the car began, and soon after, a chase ensued. Investigator Matthew received intel that Tristan had been spotted in Tennessee and quickly began the paperwork necessary to catch the alleged perpetrator. He requested Robin, Tristan's grandmother, to accompany him during the apprehension so he could speak to Tristan in her presence due to his young age. As they were driving with Evelyn, Tristan noticed blue lights trailing them. He accelerated and told his friend that his parents must have registered the car as stolen to locate him. Speeding down the highway, he tried to evade capture, but eventually pulled over when he couldn't escape his pursuers any longer. The Ford was quickly surrounded by police cars. Evelyn was utterly confused upon witnessing her boyfriend being handcuffed and taken away in a squad car. The officers observed that Tristan did not appear particularly upset or agitated. On April 11, 2019, investigator Matthew conducted an interview with Tristan. It was both videotaped and audio recorded. The young man answered all questions, confessed to the crime, and detailed his actions in full, occasionally breaking into tears. Tristan Boras, who was just a month shy of his 18th birthday, was taken into custody without bail. Shortly thereafter, the sheriff's office secured a warrant to search Tristan's Snapchat account, along with 5 cell phones that could contain pertinent information related to the crime. Another warrant was issued for the Orchard Road home, where detectives discovered another phone in the master bedroom, alongside various items including a keyboard, pen from a safe, paper cups, hammer, straw, knives, red-stained swab eyeglasses, kitchen towel hammock, digital video recorder, rug, and miscellaneous papers, South Dakota cards, boots. According to court documents, a search warrant was also issued for the Ford F-150 truck, where investigators seized a red-stained swab laptop, top computer charger, and steering wheel cover. Additionally, authorities obtained a warrant to search the home of Tristan's girlfriend in Boone, since he had spent the night at her house. Court documents state that a pillowcase, a zippered sweatshirt, and a notebook were seized from the property. The findings from the investigations and searches enabled investigators to piece together the chronology of events in great detail. The claim of self-defense was found to be untenable. Funeral services for the couple took place on April 17, 2019, at Bible Fellowship Church, with pastors William C.R. and Brad Gray officiating the ceremony. The children, grappling with the loss of their parents at such a young age, managed to write an emotive obituary. "Our parents never got the opportunity to live for themselves because they always lived for us. Jeff and Tanya have always brought immense joy and pride to their parents. Our parents made the world a better place, and we aim to continue that legacy by passionately loving people and pursuing faith." After the funeral, Taylor visited her brother in prison for the first time and was taken aback by his demeanor. Tristan showed no remorse and attempted to lay blame on the family for the incident. To his sister, it appeared he believed he would regain his freedom eventually. Disgusted, Taylor left. Her second visit was on May 11th for Tristan's birthday, accompanied by Grandma Robin. However, this meeting fared no better than the last. Her brother boasted about a party thrown for him in prison to celebrate his birthday, a behavior Taylor found unacceptable considering their parents' tragic death. Following this visit, the family decided to sever all contact with Tristan. The trial began on February 16, 2022. During proceedings, Tristan expressed regret for what had transpired and concurred with everything his family had said about him. He supported a permanent ban on contact to ensure his family's sense of safety. On March 3rd, Tristan Bohr was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for each count of first-degree murder. Judge Horn noted that mental health issues were considered as somewhat mitigating factors during sentencing. According to the psychologist's report, Tristan Borlas continues to suffer from anxiety, depression, and exhibits symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder. However, Judge Horn noted that the psychologist found no indication of psychotic disorders. Although the anxiety and depression may have been exacerbated by continued drug use, what's particularly unusual in this case is that neither Tristan's family, nor his lawyer, nor he himself provided any statements about his motives behind the crime. Here we have a perplexing situation: a devout family with a socially dangerous individual who abused illegal drugs and couldn't fully grasp or articulate the reasons for his actions. On one hand, there's a young man with low self-esteem who exhibits symptoms of anxiety and hasn't received adequate medical care. During the court session, it was mentioned that his mother helped him cope with panic attacks since she experienced them herself. One foundational principle of certain educational theories posits that children burdened with original sin are inherently immoral from birth. Therefore, education must correct them by imposing strict discipline and suppressing their self-awareness. This so-called strict love is supposedly beneficial for children. Tristan might have had an inherited overreactivity of the nervous system and grew up under stringent limits, constantly feeling inadequate as a devout individual. Some require more love, while others require less. According to recollections shared by his older sister, Tristan was intensely jealous of new siblings who diverted parental attention away from him. Initially rebellious, he then sank into depression and feelings of worthlessness, compounded by illicit drug use and subsequent panic attacks, as well as depersonalization, derealization states. He couldn't embrace his parents' devotion to their faith and couldn't meet his mother's expectations or align with what she envisioned for him, which required correction. Instead of securing a competent therapist's assistance as needed, changes were listed together by him and his mother. This approach may have missed critical opportunities to address underlying issues. Could this senseless and tragic event have been avoided in a truly loving family? That remains uncertain, a question echoic in the aftermath. The case of Annie Lee, found bricked up in a wall on her own wedding day. Yale Research University in the United States is one of the most famous and prestigious higher education institutions not only in America, but also in the whole world. Its total area covers almost 70 hectares of land, on which there are more than 200 buildings. This territory is considered safe enough, but sometimes there are high-profile crimes. For example, in 1999, a 21-year-old student, Susan Joven, was brutally murdered there. This crime was never solved, but for a long time, the main suspect in the case was a university professor and the girl's supervisor, James Van de Velde. The story, which will be discussed today, took place 10 years after the brutal murder of Susan and turned out to be no less cruel and shocking. True, this time the killer did not manage to escape punishment. The victim of the crime was a 24-year-old graduate student named Annie Lee, who at the time was engaged in writing a dissertation, seeking a degree. The girl was literally walled up inside the university walls in the hope that her body would never be found. The motives for this heinous crime have not been fully elucidated. The killer himself could not explain what made him kill the student, and the investigation put forward two main and, in a sense, contradictory versions. According to the first, the reason for the murder was a work conflict and personal animosity. According to the other version, the perpetrator was secretly in love with his victim, and he was driven by jealousy and morbid passion. In favor of the second theory was the fact that Annie took her life 5 days before her wedding. Who was Annie Lee? Annie Maria Lee was born in 1985, the 3rd of July in San Jose, California, and became the only child in a simple family of Vivian Vam Lee and Hogan Lee, immigrants from Vietnam. From an early age, the girl was unusually smart and talented, studied on the excellent, and was considered the best student in school. And her favorite subjects were chemistry and biology. Teachers even then prophesied her a great future in science, and also said that she will probably one day be awarded the Nobel Prize for her discoveries and achievements. The girl was a regular participant of school scientific conferences, and her work was repeatedly recognized with various prizes and awards. As a high school student, she won $165,000 as a scholarship to study at any of the universities in the United States. Annie's choice fell on the University of Rochester in New York, where she studied in the specialties of biology of cellular development as well as medical anthropology. Then the girl entered the graduate school of the prestigious Yale University, where she worked in a scientific laboratory, diligently studied chemistry and biology to get a doctoral degree. The girl was engaged in writing a dissertation, which was devoted to the study of diseases provoked by metabolic disorders. Lee also devoted a lot of time to work in the laboratory. She made good progress in her research and even managed to make a certain contribution to the treatment of diabetes mellitus, as well as some forms of cancer. Personal life of a female student. While studying at the University of Rochester in New York, young Annie met a young man whose name was Jonathan Wadowski. He was also an excellent student and a promising scientist, but specialized in physical and mathematical sciences. The relationship between them developed quite quickly, and the parents of the couple in love were very pleased with the choice of their children. After receiving a diploma, Annie went to New Haven, Connecticut, to Yale, and her lover decided to do science at Columbia University in New York. But despite the distance that separated the couple, the romance continued. They visited each other every weekend and made big plans for the future. In the summer of 2009, Jonathan made a formal marriage proposal to his girlfriend, giving a beautiful diamond ring, and the happy girl willingly agreed to become his wife. The wedding was scheduled for Sunday, September 13, 2009. However, after the engagement, young people told about the upcoming solemn event only to their parents, and friends and colleagues of the couple remained in the dark. Only a week before the wedding, September 6th, the girl sent emails to friends and colleagues which reported that she and Jonathan are preparing to enter into marriage and attached an invitation to the wedding. The next day, the news became perhaps the most talked about news in the department and in the lab where Annie worked. The couple planned to have the ceremony on Long Island and then fly to one of the fashionable resorts in Greece, where they were going to spend their honeymoon. It is noteworthy that just a few months before the tragedy, the girl had written an article for a university publication in which she warned students about various dangers and told them how to protect themselves while being outside their campus. The graduate student herself was waiting for trouble at her workplace and, alas, was unable to protect herself. Entered the building and disappeared without a trace. On Tuesday, September 8th, early in the morning, Lee left the university dormitory where she shared a room with 3 friends and went to the laboratory of the University Medical Center where she worked. The building is located on Amistad Street, and access to it, as well as any movement inside, is only possible with a pass and a special key card. The CCTV camera at the entrance recorded Annie entering the building at around 10 o'clock in the morning. She went straight to her office where she changed her clothes, left her bag with personal belongings, put on a medical coat, and then locked the door, and went to work in the bio lab. But she never came back. That day she seemed to disappear somewhere in the corridors, and no one ever saw her alive again. In the evening of the same day, Annie's dormitory neighbors were the first to sound the alarm. Since the girl was very responsible and punctual, she always came back at about the same time. But it was nearing midnight, and she was still gone. In addition, Lee's phone did not answer, and therefore the worried friends decided to report it to the police. As it turned out, the girl's parents and fiancé also could not reach her that night, but they thought that perhaps she was delayed at work because of the heavy workload, and after herself will call them back. Arriving police officers, having heard about what happened, were not too concerned either, and assumed that Annie was a typical runaway bride, and she, unable to cope with the nervous tension on the eve of the wedding, decided to leave everything for a while to put her thoughts in order. However, the opinion of law enforcement officers quickly changed after they examined the girl's office, as well as studied CCTV footage and tracked the movements of the graduate student inside the building using a key card belonging to her. It appeared that Annie had entered the building in the morning but never left it again. Her clothes, bag, wallet, and cell phone were left in the office. No trace of the girl was found, as if she had simply disappeared. No solid evidence or leads could be found, so the Federal Bureau of Investigation was called in. Search for missing graduate student and interrogation of suspects. Everyone who knew Lee personally described her as intelligent, kind, cheerful, and very energetic. She had no enemies or ill-wishers, according to those around her. The family and the fiancé waited several days for any news, sincerely hoping that Annie would be found alive. However, the detectives were not so optimistic, and taking into account all the circumstances, came to the conclusion that the girl is most likely no longer alive. The laboratory building was placed under special guard as a likely crime scene, and since only staff and students had access to it by name badges, the circle of suspects was clearly defined and limited. The atmosphere at the university was very tense, because everyone realized that a possible murderer was somewhere nearby. Jonathan, who arrived in New Haven on the first flight, was also questioned, but the young man had an ironclad alibi, because he was in another state. In addition, the groom was very concerned about what was going on, and seemed to be balancing on the verge of a nervous breakdown himself. Among the suspects was one of the teachers and supervisor of the girl. He, on the day of her disappearance, for some unknown reason, canceled his lectures, and he had no alibi. However, after interrogation, his involvement in the case was strongly doubted. However, the police still had no doubt that the perpetrator should be sought among the students, faculty, and staff of the laboratory of Yale University. A gruesome discovery in the wall of a building. On September 12th, the first tangible evidence that the missing graduate student was no longer alive was discovered. Under the slabs of the false ceiling in one of the auxiliary rooms found a medical coat with bloodstains. The item did not belong to Lee, but the blood on it, as the examination showed, was hers. Now the girl was officially considered dead, and the case was reclassified as a murder. On Sunday, September 13th, when Annie was to be legally married to her lover and then fly with him to Greece on a wedding trip, her disfigured, breathless body was found on the technical floor of the laboratory. The victim had been hidden in the wall in a narrow pipeline where she had been shoved upside down. Since the girl was petite, her height was less than 150 centimeters, and fragile build, obviously, to put her there did not leave much difficulty. A service dog, which smelled the odor of decomposition, helped to find the terrible hiding place. The police immediately noted that the corpse could only be placed here by a person who knows the layout of the building well, as it is simply impossible to choose a better place to hide the remains. The girl's body was badly disfigured. Almost all her ribs were broken. Her limbs were damaged. Some of her teeth were knocked out. But the cause of death, according to the conclusion of pathologists, was mechanical asphyxia. To put it simply, the unfortunate woman was severely beaten and then strangled, and her breathless body was stuffed into a pipe in the basement wall. It was also curious that traces of seminal fluid were found on the clothes of the murdered woman, but the examination showed that she herself had not been raped. prime suspect. A few days earlier, a young technician named Raymond John Clark III had come to the attention of the police. He was questioned along with other lab employees, but he was the only person who claimed to have allegedly seen Lee leave the building that evening, but was without her belongings, as if she was going to return. The young man's words immediately struck law enforcement as suspicious, and when the missing woman's body was found, Raymond became the prime suspect. They collected a DNA sample from the boy and took from him a covenant not to leave the country until the end of the investigation. But on September 17th, he was arrested. The examination showed that it was his seminal fluid found on the clothes of the murdered woman, and his robe with traces of the victim's blood was hidden under the slabs of the suspended ceiling. Moreover, there were suspicious bruises on the technician's body, which indicated that the girl had been desperately defending herself before her death. He himself, despite the obvious evidence, categorically denied his involvement in the case. However, as it turned out, Raymond was a man with a temper and conflict. At work, he repeatedly entered into verbal altercations with laboratory staff, and in ordinary life was characterized by cruelty, allowing himself to beat girls with whom he had various times met. Clark could not boast of serious achievements in his studies, but at school he was considered a promising athlete, had a rather attractive appearance, was strong, and enjoyed the success of the fair sex. The guy could not enter the university because of a low passing score, but thanks to the patronage of some of his relatives, he was hired to work in the laboratory, where he was first a janitor, and after a few years he was promoted to technician. During that period, he was dating a girl named Jessica Del Rocco, who in court agreed to testify against her ex-lover. She characterized Clark as a tyrant obsessed with control and surveillance. According to the girl, the boyfriend checked her phone, read correspondence, forbade to communicate with friends, and himself determined where she went and what to wear. In case of disagreements, he used his fists. After another beating, she literally ran away from him and even moved for a while to relatives in another state, fearing persecution, but the police then never went to the police. For the past year, Raymond had been dating a Yale University student named Jennifer Hromadko. Despite rumors about the pathological infidelity of the guy and his relationship with other students, graduate students, as well as some employees of the laboratory, Jennifer accepted Clark's proposal to become his wife and even began to prepare for the wedding. Motive for murder. Despite the fact that the evidence of Raymond's guilt was abundant, his motive remained unclear. He himself has not voiced it even after he fully admitted his guilt. Initially put forward the version that the murder occurred on the basis of industrial conflict. So Lee conducted experiments on laboratory mice, studying the effectiveness of enzymes in the treatment of cancer, diabetes, and other ailments, and the rodents themselves were under the control of Clark, who considered the laboratory as his domain. He himself always followed the rules and forced all employees to adhere to them, often behaved arrogantly and provoked conflicts, for which he repeatedly complained to his superiors. On the day of the murder, the girl stayed late in the laboratory, and judging by her movements with the key card, she entered the block where the experimental animals were kept. Clark, who might not have liked the fact that a co-worker was in a room he had already cleaned, had also entered. On this ground, there could be a conflict, which turned into a fight and ended in strangulation in a fit of rage. However, there is another version, according to which Raymond has long tried to court a pretty graduate student, but she did not reciprocate, which hurt the guy, unused to refusals. And on September 7th, when it became known about the upcoming wedding of the girl, the technician literally went crazy with jealousy. The next day, left alone with her in the laboratory, he attacked Lee, beat her, attempted rape, and strangled her. This version explains the presence of seminal fluid on the clothes of the murdered, but it has never been unequivocally proven. Trial and verdict. This case received wide publicity from the very beginning because the murder was committed on the campus of a prestigious university, and the victim was a graduate student and a rising star of science. The media followed the investigation and promptly reported on new details. By the way, Clark's ex-girlfriend Jessica Del Rocco gave a number of interviews and also appeared on several popular talk shows where she spoke in detail about her relationship with the suspect. Raymond first appeared in court in Connecticut on October 6, 2009, but then he denied his involvement in the murder and denied the charges against him. The hearing was postponed several times until all the materials and evidence in the case were collected. It was established that Clark had spent at least 1 hour with Lee in the laboratory, and it was during that time that the brutal murder of the girl took place. Then, probably in an effort to confuse his tracks, he used his keycard more than 50 times in various places until he was on the technical floor, where he spent about a quarter of an hour hiding the body in the wall. After that, the fire alarm in the mission suddenly went off, which the technician himself activated in order to go outside with the rest of the staff and avert suspicion from himself. An important detail was the fact that in the pocket of the robe found under the false ceiling was found a green ballpoint pen, which, as shown by the examination, Clark signed that day in various work logs. There were also witnesses who saw the technician scrubbing the lab floor in several specific places over the next few days, which seemed odd because it appeared to be clean. Moreover, he had thrown away all of the equipment used in the cleaning, as well as a pack of tissues on the table that had small brown stains on it that looked like blood splatters. All of this was later found in a trash can, and forensics confirmed that Raymond had been so thorough in trying to get rid of traces of his victim's blood. In February 2011, the defendant agreed to make a deal with the investigation and plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. So, at the next court hearing, held on March 17, 2011, Clark pleaded guilty to murder and attempted rape, as well as repented and apologized to the parents and fiancée of the girl who died at his hands. However, he never revealed the details of what happened that terrible evening in the laboratory, as well as refused to explain the motive for his act. Raymond John Clark III was sentenced to 44 years in prison. The killer is currently serving his sentence at the Cheshire Correctional Institution in New Haven County, Connecticut, and he will not be released until September 2053. Parents and fiancée Annie, in interview, have declared that they consider the appointed sentence quite fair, though it will not return to them the only daughter and the favorite bride. The girl's mother, Vivian Van Lee, made a closing speech at the sentencing. She, with tears in her eyes, said, "I will never be able to hold Annie again. I will never see my daughter walk down the aisle. I will never hear her laugh, and I will never have grandchildren. Goodbye, my child, the most wonderful gift God has sent me." The woman also read a poem she had written in her native Vietnamese dedicated to her daughter. 22-year-old Brandon Gonsalves lived with his small family in Goregaon West. Now Goregaon West was becoming a crowded suburb in Mumbai city. Besides Gonsalves, his family only consisted of his mother and older sister. On December 19, 2016, like every day, Gonsalves went for a morning walk from his home to Ari Colony. Usually, he would return home within an hour after his stroll, but today he didn't come back until afternoon. Concerned, Gonsalves' mother Seema and older sister Kashma first called his friends because he had left his phone at home today. Despite contacting some friends, they couldn't find any information about Gonsalves. Now, the sun had already set, and night was slowly falling. Worried about their son, Seema took her daughter and went to the nearby Dindoshi police station to file a missing person report. Now, besides Gonsalves' family and friends, the police are also trying to find him. Meanwhile, the Dindoshi police station had distributed Gonsalves' photo to nearby police stations as well. However, amidst this, around 12:30 in the afternoon on December 22nd, a call comes to the nearby Eri police station. The caller reports that he has just seen a headless body. Upon hearing this, The police promptly rushed to the reported location in Airy Colony. Upon arrival, the scene that they witnessed astonishes them. There, beneath a tree, lies a body without a head, neck, or clothes, and upon seeing it, it seemed as if someone had placed it there deliberately. Now, witnessing this sight, the police cordoned off the area completely, not allowing any ordinary person to approach. Afterwards, the police began their investigation by first examining the area nearby. Just 20 meters away from the body, the police found the head and clothes stained with blood. Additionally, a few meters away from the body, the police also found some other items used in worship, such as a mirror, coconut, padukas, threads, turmeric powder, and kumkum powder, aka vermilion. Anyway, the police collected these items and sent the body to a nearby hospital for post-mortem. Subsequently, the files of missing persons were checked at the Airy police station, and the identification of this dead body was made with a boy named Brandon Gonsalves. As I mentioned earlier, the missing report of Brandon Gonsalves had been distributed to all nearby police stations by Dindoshi Police. So now the Airy police confirmed that he was the same boy who had gone missing 3 days ago on December 19th. Well, now Gonsalves' family is also informed, and thus the missing case of Gonsalves turns into a murder case. After this, as far as I have read, perhaps the police had to form 8+ teams to search for Gonsalves' killer, including a special team from the crime branch. But seeing the body of her only son in this condition, Gonsalves' mother Seema and elder sister Kashma were both in a terrible state of distress. So much so that when Seema saw her son in this condition, she fainted upon seeing the body. However, the police quickly began their investigation to find the culprits. On the other hand, some shocking details emerged in Gonsalves' post-mortem report. The post-mortem report stated that Gonsalves' tongue, voice box, skin from his right cheek, and even his entire neck were missing, with the neck bone intact. This means that someone had killed Gonsalves so brutally that even the small spine is fragment of our neck, the neck spine, was broken. All these things were horrifying the police because initially the police thought this case seemed to be a result of personal rivalry, as if someone had killed Gonsalves to settle a score, but the police were soon to be proven wrong. Actually, according to the post-mortem report, it was found that Gonsalves' death occurred due to the separation of his head from his body. However, forensic pathologists also checked whether Gonsalves was given any drugs or substances before being killed, but nothing like that was found in any post-mortem report. After that, the police found out that Gonsalves was murdered 3 days before his body was found, between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. on the same day he went missing. Additionally, there were no signs of any fight, struggle, or injury on his body, indicating that Gonsalves didn't even try to save himself until his last breath. Furthermore, 2 marks were found on Gonsalves' body. Actually, there were 2 cross symbols on his forehead and right hand, which seemed to have been made with a sharp object. After learning about all these things, this case became even more intriguing for the police and investigators, because now there were a lot more questions in front of the police. Looking at Gonsalves' body, it seemed as if his body had been cut twice. First, his head was separated from his shoulders, and then later his neck was cut from the head. Additionally, forensic experts said that where Gonsalves' body was found, there was absolutely no evidence of his murder, if not a single trace of blood was found there. So it was clear that Gonsalves was killed somewhere else, and then some parts of his body were removed to perform some rituals or something similar. Later, his body and clothes were thrown away in this deserted place. Here, when the police found the materials of worship and glass, coconuts, slippers, turmeric, and vermilion at the crime scene, for the first time, this case seems like a human sacrifice. After the possibility arose that Gonsalves might be taken to another location and harmed, the police began checking the CCTV cameras around the Airy colony. But first, they checked the CCTV cameras around his house. They saw Gonsalves leaving with his dog around 7 o'clock in the morning and returning after a morning walk within an hour. However, just 10 minutes later, Gonsalves left his house again, but this time with a bag. Now, what was in that bag could not be determined because the bag itself was not found. But then, a little further from Gonsalves's house, the police spotted a white Audi car in another CCTV footage with two people inside, a driver and a woman in a white Punjabi suit. It was shown in the CCTV that they were following Gonsalves slowly with their car. The woman, wearing a white Punjabi suit, is given directions to the driver, telling him to take the car in that direction. However, the police also questioned Gonsalves' family members to see if anyone might know that woman and driver, but the police didn't get any good response from there either. The police suspected that there might be more than two people in the car, and unfortunately, the day Gonsalves's body was found, the two CCTV cameras in that area were not working. This raised suspicion for the police that Gonsalves was abducted on December 19th in this same car and then murdered elsewhere, with his body being thrown in a deserted place in Airy Colony on the dark night or morning of December 22nd. But since then, investigators have felt that perhaps a local person might be involved in this murder case, because the police checked 70-plus CCTV cameras in this entire case, but none of them recorded anything suspicious that would raise suspicion on any individual. The investigators clarified that perhaps the killers were aware of the location of every CCTV camera in the Airy Colony. This helped them in escaping from the colony and Goragayan. This clears one thing, that the killer was someone who was well acquainted with Goragayan and the colony, because an outsider couldn't have known every road in CCTV so well. The investigators explored all possible angles of Gonsalves's killing, such as a love affair angle, whether someone jealous killed Gonsalves, and a personal rivalry, human sacrifice angle, robbery, and property dispute. But the police never found any leads in any angle. Although for some time, the police kept the angle of human sacrifice on the table and even questioned several tantrics, babas, and black magicians about the cut parts of the body, the mark of the cross on the forehead and the right hand, whether there was any connection between them or not. But the police didn't get any help from here either. Gonsalves was a middle-class boy who decided to graduate in arts. However, due to some reasons, he dropped out of college as well. His father had passed away 3 years ago, leaving Gonsalves in a state of depression for a long time. During the police investigation, Gonsalves' call records were also checked, but no suspicious numbers were found. In fact, Gonsalves rarely talked to anyone, except for his family, or perhaps 3 or 4 friends. But what intrigued the police in this case was finding a diary in Gonsalves's room. Within it were some sketches that further complicated this case. Actually, if these sketches are examined closely, it will be apparent that they tell the story of 2 sacrifices. In the first, a person is attempting to cut off an animal's head while wearing a suit. Meanwhile, in the second sacrifice, a man's head is being cut off with a saw. In addition to these, an attempt has been made to portray the SpongeBob cartoon character as a monster. On the other side of the page, a picture of a deer without a head has been drawn, and right next to it, only the head of a lion cub has been drawn. Furthermore, when the police went inside Gonsalves's house, they found a strange sign on a wall just behind the door, as if it were some sort of cult symbol. Now, what was even more surprising was that when the Mumbai police tried to recreate the crime scene with Gonsalves's dog, the startling thing was that Gonsalves's dog went straight to where Gonsalves's body was lying with a tree. After a while, his dog arrived at the spot where Gonsalves's body was found, just a few meters away. Among all the cases we've explained on this channel so far, this case was the weirdest, like how Gonsalves' dog somehow went to the places where his body was found. It's possible that when Gonsalves first went out for a walk with his dog on December 19th, he might have already gone to the place where his body was found. Another point is that the white Audi car following Gonsalves might have been known to him, and he might have gone with them willingly, sitting in the car. Additionally, it's possible that after returning home, Gonsalves took the bag with him, which might have contained items related to worship like coconut, padukas, etc. Because it's also being said on the internet that maybe Gonsalves sacrificed himself. Today, it's been over 7 years since this case, but the murderer of Brandon Gonsalves is still unknown. Meanwhile, Gonsalves's mother and sister have made numerous visits to the police station and the crime branch office to find out the status of their son Brandon Gonsalves's murder case. During this time, Gonsalves's mother and sister were afraid that the police might close Gonsalves's murder case. Due to this reason, Seema's elder daughter Kashma appealed to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the state's chief minister to seek justice. Well, if this case gets solved in the future, we will definitely update you through this channel's community post. But so far, this case remains unsolved. With this, Brandon Gonsalves's case also concludes here. Before moving forward, quickly subscribe to the channel. This is strange. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Quickly subscribe to it. Now we are jumped to the next story. This is the story of Madanapalli city in the state of Andhra Pradesh, India, which is Asia's largest tomato market. Besides, there are many mountains here as well. It was January 24th, 2021, around 8:30 p.m. on Sunday night in Madanapalli, when Dr. V. Purushotham Naidu, the head of the Naidu family, called his friend Raju and said on the phone, "Both my daughters are no longer in this world. Alekhya, 27, and Saidivya, 22, have both passed away, but there's nothing to worry about. Tomorrow morning, they will come back through reincarnation because the Kal Yuga is ending, and the Satyug will begin from tomorrow." Upon hearing this, Raju said to his friend Dr. Naidu, "Everything is normal at home. Speaking such language against your daughters doesn't suit you." In response, Dr. Naidu said, "No, Raju, I am telling the truth. In a while, both I and your sister-in-law will leave our bodies in Kal Yuga and be born again in Satyug." Upon hearing this, Dr. Naidu's friend Raju started feeling extremely restless. Consequently, he abruptly ended the call and within a few minutes arrived at Dr. Naidu's house. Raju reached there, knocked on the door, and just as the door was about to open, Dr. Naidu himself appeared, looking completely normal. But when Raju went inside and saw the scene there, his eyes widened in shock, because Dr. Naidu had spoken the truth. Lying on the ground in the prayer room of his house was the lifeless body of his 27-year-old daughter, Alekhya. She had completed her master's in Bhopal and now was preparing for the civil services. Her face was pale, and blood was oozing from various places. After this, Dr. Naidu took Raju to another room adjacent to the prayer room, where the dead body of his 22-year-old daughter, Saidivya, lay on the ground. She had been struck with a trident of Lord Shiva on her forehead, and a small brass pot placed in the prayer room was inserted into her mouth. The clothes were removed from both bodies, and they were wrapped in red cloth. Additionally, their hair was partially cut, and they were placed in front of the statue of Lord Shiva in the temple. They had scattered many worship materials around the bodies. However, despite seeing the bodies of their daughters, there was no sign of tension or sorrow on the faces of Dr. Naidu and his wife Padmaja. This behavior of his friend and his wife seemed very strange to Raju. Therefore, he bids them goodbye and leaves their house. However, instead of going home, he goes straight to the police station and tells the police the whole story of how these educated parents sacrificed their daughters. He also informs them about the mental condition of Dr. Naidu and his wife. However, the police were having little belief in Raju's story after hearing this strange tale. Because for the past year, Dr. Naidu and his family, who had been living in the new house in Madanapal, had earned quite a reputation in the city. Anyway, after that, the police station in charge, along with some officers, directly reached the Naidu family's house. When the police knocked on the door, once again it was Dr. Naidu who opened it, but seeing her husband's friend with him, Padmaja got very angry and started shouting at the police because they had once again disrupted their worship. Now, the argument between the police and the Naidu family had attracted neighbors from nearby. Now, as soon as the police entered the house and saw what was inside, they too were astonished. Later, after hearing Raju, the police realized that it was a case of superstition. Although Mr. and Mrs. Naidu repeatedly tried to convince the police that both their daughters would return to life before sunrise tomorrow, they were just saying that they only need a day's time, and tomorrow morning both our daughters will come back to life. Then you all will be surprised." But the police knew that both girls were dead, so how could they come back to life? Therefore, Mr. and Mrs. Nayudu were first explained with great difficulty. But when they still didn't understand, the police showed some firmness and took both of them to the police station. Afterwards, a forensic team was called in to investigate the crime scene. The forensic team continued their examination for some time and then sent the bodies for post-mortem. Now, the police have started investigating both inside and outside the house. Here, the police learned from neighbors of the Naidu family that someone from the family used to go out daily to buy something, but for the past 3 days, no one has come out of the house, nor has anyone gone inside, not even the maid who used to clean the house, as these people did not even call her. After that, the police directly approached the maid, who told them that 3 days ago, she was told by the Nayadus that we are going to perform a special worship in the house for 3 days, and until we call you, do not come to work at the house. On the other hand, upon checking both girls' social media profiles and bookshelves inside the house, the police found out that Alekia highly respects Indian philosopher Osho. On his social media posts, Osho's name appeared repeatedly, indicating that he was one of Alekia's favorite people. Additionally, beside Alekia's dead body, was a book by the spiritual guru Meher Baba. Besides, pictures of Sri Sai Baba, Meher Baba, and Osho were plastered all over their house. Furthermore, neighbors often heard prayers and tantric chants from their house, and several times they saw some swamis entering the house. On the other hand, what was surprising was that just a few days before the murder, Alekia posted twice on her Instagram. In one post, she wrote, "Work is done," and in the second post, "Shiva is coming." Well, only Dr. Nayudu and Padmaja, who were present in the custody, could reveal the truth behind this. However, controlling Padmaja was proving to be extremely difficult for the police. But before the custody, when the police were taking both husband and wife for a COVID test, Padmaja started saying, "I am Shiva myself. Because of my body particles, COVID has spread everywhere. It did not come from China." After getting their COVID tests done, Dr. Naidu informed the police about his background. Actually, Dr. Naidu had a master's in philosophy and science. In addition, he had obtained a PhD and was currently a professor of chemistry at Government Degree College for Women, Nadanapali. His wife, Padmaja, was a gold medalist in mathematics and had been teaching at the famous schools of Madanapal for nearly 23 years, including at Masterminds IIT Talent High School. Alongside, she also had a master's in science. Additionally, Alekia, 27, was a postgraduate from Bhopal and then an aspirant for civil services. Furthermore, Saidivya, a 22-year-old, was training at the A.R. Rahman Music Conservatory in Mumbai after completing her Bachelor of Business Administration course. However, due to the lockdown, both of them had to return home. You might also wonder why, with such educated family members, these individuals attempted suicide. You'll find the answer by the end of the video. Afterwards, Alekia picked up Lord Shiva's trident from the temple and thrust it into her sister Divya's forehead. Then a copper vessel was placed in her mouth. Following the death of her younger sister Divya, Alekia told her mother that now she had to kill her. As a result, Padmaja struck Alekia on the head with a dumbbell kept in the house. Consequently, Alekia also died shortly thereafter. After killing both their daughters, both the husband and wife wandered around their bodies for quite some time. Now, because of the insistence of the wife and daughter, it was Dr. Nayudu's turn. Perhaps out of fear, he called his friend and told him the whole matter, and if he hadn't made that call, perhaps neither of them would be in this world today. However, Due to this, Padmaja scolded her husband, Dr. Nayudu, a lot, saying, "You are a coward. Because of you, our secret got out and our daughters couldn't come back." After seeing all this, it was finalized in this case that due to mental illness, all these family members had planned this, and it was revealed from a psychiatrist's source that their entire family was dealing with a rare disorder called shared psychotic disorder. Actually, in this disorder, more than two people who are in close relationships have a similar way of thinking. And it's because of this disorder that Alakia and Saidivya are no longer in this world today. In this double murder case, Alakia had a Canadian friend who told the print media that he couldn't believe for many days that Alakia could do such a thing. After questioning on Monday evening, funeral of both these girls were performed, and permission for this was given only to Dr. Nayudu, while the girl's mother, Padmaja, was not allowed to participate for some reasons. In my opinion, in this case, Saidivya and Dr. Purushottam Nayudu seem innocent to me. Although if they hadn't fallen into the temptation of Alekia and Padmaja, perhaps this would have been a happy family today. So with this, the case comes to an end here. Friends, how did you like this combined cases? Do you want to see such combined cases in the future too? Please share your opinion in the comment box. If you appreciate our efforts, like and share this video. If you haven't subscribed, do so now.